Betty.
Good, how are you?
Pitching my Thank you, everybody, for attending today. We are at the October Commission meeting of the Public Works Department, and we're starting a little bit late. I apologize. We're accommodating this venue in deference to the construction over on Pine Street, which I have not yet seen, but I'm sure our staff is accommodating over there to, if you like inhaling dust, I'm sure it'd be a good trip for you. Real quick, welcome for everybody here. I know we will have some comments, and really looking forward to our second month in a row of hearing from the kids in our city, our true future residents. So we're extremely excited, and you'll be up in just a moment, I promise. A few notes first. We generally recommend to keep comments to about 3 minutes. We may find a little leeway on that for some of our speakers here. We also, just so everyone knows, we don't normally have back and forth in real time, as far as when we start talking about whatever issue may be occurring around the city. So we hear from you, and then we have an agenda that we follow, which is actually up on the screen, and maybe whoever is driving can scroll down a little bit so that agenda can surface. So just know that we generally don't do back and forth, maybe a little bit to speak to a common issue, but that's one other thing. We have these time limits, of course. If we do say that time is running long, that we try to honor our neighbors, because we all want to give everyone a chance to participate, and really to honor everybody who's here, whose time is invested in the meeting. And lastly, just one big note, especially the kids, that you will be on TV this evening. So you can watch yourselves on Channel 17 at a later date. I couldn't tell you when. Perhaps our cameraman could fill you in on that. But so put on your best smiles. All right. With that said, our first item on the agenda is the agenda itself, checking in with the commissioners here on if there are any changes to the agenda. motion to accept the agenda.
We have a motion to accept the agenda.
Second.
Commissioner Hogan, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Agenda passes. We move on to item number 3, which is public forum. Another real quick doodle here, it would be, this is your chance to speak about anything under the sun, hopefully regarding the public works. We can't help if it's outside of our realm. As we get into the agenda, we do also welcome public comments for specific items, but we try to restrict those to the agenda items as they come. So narrow streets, for example, we would speak to that particular issue. But right now would be the time to speak about anything, especially the consent agenda, which is next. So whatever you wish to speak about, or if anyone has special bedtime considerations, now is a good time to come up to the mic. And we may have a sign-up sheet, so maybe we'll go by order here.
Great. Dove Stucker and Julian Stucker. Come on up.
Thanks in advance, and thanks for honoring bedtimes. I think the children might peel off here pretty soon. So I'm Dove Stucker. I live on Drew Street, and I'm just going to set the context a little bit for some of the kids' concerns. All of these kids have a route to school or a route that crosses where Route 127 dumps into Park Street and crosses Manhattan. That's an area of concern. It feels like an area of urgency. It's really fast traffic, 50, 55 miles an hour, pouring into a residential area at 25. And the kids can speak to how that feels, but it's really a design problem. The good news is that it feels like because it's a design problem, it can be redesigned. And there are some ways to think about that. There is a C-Click-Fix post that got a lot of traffic and a lot of comments. I did send you all a link, and I think that'll offer more context. There is a growing chorus of concern in our neighborhood, especially for our most vulnerable. Many of them are here. I guess I would just add that this is clearly about an intersection, but it also connects to a lot of other pieces that the city is thinking about. Safety for pedestrians and bikers, multimodal transit, accessibility, just access in general, and obviously the 2030 goals for transportation for the city. But I would add another one and just highlight equity. The families that can be here tonight are the families who are connected, who have the ability to come out on an evening to do this. I actually spoke with a number of other kids in the neighborhood who are really supportive, but whose families, are not set up to be here this evening. Some of those families are more marginalized economically. They may not have cars, and so, every family here could drive their kids to school, but that just adds cars to the road. So, being aware that these voices are actually speaking for themselves, but also for a number of other folks who couldn't be here tonight. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Julian Stucker, followed by Sasha.
I walk to school every day, and every single day people run through red lights, and it just feels really unsafe because of how fast the cars come off. And also, the walking signal is not long enough for someone to cross safely. And it's also really unsafe for anyone to cross because it, like I said before, how fast cars are coming off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sasha, followed by Lynn Martin. Hello.
I'm Sasha, and I'm 5 years old, and I live on Drew Street, and every day I walk to school, cars run through red lights, and it's not safe for anyone to cross.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lynn Martin, followed by Shayna Walker.
I'm going to hand this in after I read it.
Great.
Okay, my name is Lynn Martin, and I live on Mansfield Avenue and drive into the city on a daily basis. I'm concerned about the safety of the intersections where North Prospect, North Willard, North Union cross Pearl Street, as I've recently had several bad experiences at those corners. The worst was while turning right onto Pearl at North Willard. I was reluctant to turn on red because I had difficulty there before. Unfortunately, the pressure of other cars coming up behind prompted me to cautiously edge my car into the intersection. I carefully looked right and left for cars and simultaneously for pedestrians on all four corners, including any foot traffic approaching from the part of the sidewalk that's now behind my car. As I turned right, it was 3 p.m. The afternoon sun blinded me, even though I had sunglasses on. By the time I took all the potential obstacles into account and glanced back, UVM students were in the roadway I was entering. I drive very slowly, so nobody was scared except me. But I had a good scare. And not to be forgotten, there was also a school crossing guard present. I now assiduously avoid this intersection after 8 a.m. in the morning. The second hazard area, and almost as bad, is just before Pearl is crossed by Union. There are numerous issues there. One, the lane split into 3, but the westbound right-hand lane in front of the liquor store is not usable when cars are parked at the meters or buses stop at the GMT sign. The crossing signal indicates pedestrians have the right-of-way. At the same time, cars have a green light, not to forget bicycles who may be involved here too, allowing them to turn right or left off Pearl. There is a no turn on right sign on Union as it crosses Pearl, which is very helpful when going straight across, but even then, pedestrians on the far side of the intersection have the right-of-way when the car has a green light. Third, where Prospect crosses Pearl, I patiently waited for the crossing signal to change off no right turn on red, which is the indication when students are given the right-of-way. Then, looking carefully at in all three directions, I slowly pulled forward. But the no right turn on red had come on again, and a student was stepping into the roadway. I was able to stop in good order. I had mistakenly thought the pedestrian crossing sign would only activate once in the light cycle, something that is mostly so at other intersections in the city. The intersection is also very hazardous, taking a left onto South Prospect from Pearl/Colchester, as there is no visibility of the crossing signals, and both pedestrians and cars go to green at the same time. I've concluded that the above intersections are not safe when there is both heavy foot and vehicular traffic. To get downtown, I now drive straight down North Street and take a left onto North Winooski, with similar precautions when returning. There are no pedestrian walk signs that have poor visibility, meaning I can see the crossing countdown from my car, but I don't think I should need to take an alternative route to avoid one of the main thoroughfares. To address the problem in the short term, please put no right turn or left turn signs on the offending corners, and then, as a longer-term solution, put in roundabouts. Some of our intersections are not safe because they have exceeded the amount of traffic they can support. They need a more effective solution than what is in place now. All three of these intersections are on the high crash list of VT Trans, and this makes Pearl Street between Prospect and North Winooski a very dangerous stretch. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I just give this to you?
You give it to Holly, and we will get it in the packet. Thank you, Lynn.
Okay.
Shayna Walker, followed by Aaron Keach.
So my name is Shayna Walker. I'm 10 years old, and I live on Strong Street. And echoing what Jillian said, I walk to school almost every day, and the intersection coming off from 127, cars come from all different directions going really fast, and even after the light turns red, cars still drive through. And then the sign that says no turn on red, some cars, it looks like they don't even see it because they still turn when they're not supposed to. And I just, like, as I said, I walk to school almost every day, so I don't really feel like safe about both of those things.
Thank you, Shayna.
Thank you, Aaron Keach, followed by Evan Keach.
Yeah, hey. Aaron Keach, I live on Ward Street, and my son Evan was with me here. He goes to IAA first grade, but he's a little shy about coming up to speak after me.
Yeah.
I only get to walk him to school on Fridays. And so far this year, just on those Fridays, I've been hit by a car crossing North Champlain, the vehicle trying to do a right on red onto Manhattan. And I've had a standoff with a pickup truck at Park that ran the red light. And I literally was in the road playing chicken with a pickup truck. That's, I didn't know what to do. I mean, am I supposed to jump left or right? I've also on, what was that, Green Up Day? My kids and I witnessed a pickup truck with a man with a young son T-bone another vehicle with a man with 3 young girls in it. Clearly, these intersections are not set up in a safe manner. Any pedestrian that chooses to exercise their rights, you guys would have ambulances there every single day. 'Cause people are always running those reds. Just stacked vehicles of yellows. No one slows down for the yellows there. It's a means of speeding up. And being that those vehicles are coming off a 50-mile-per-hour road and they completely neglect the 25-mile-per-hour sign, that's some speed. My son, the one thing that he wanted to point out is that he will not cross Park Street until I'm halfway across it. And that's not a rule I set up. That's something he conveyed to me. That's something he established on his own. That's terrible. That's pretty much all I want to say. I don't want to tell you how to fix it. I've got 1,000 ideas, but I don't know if you guys include the public in that process or not, but I'm sure we all have some things to add. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, we will be reaching out to residents soon to have a walk-to-school effort here soon. And Amy Cudney is next with Nicole Siegelson following.
Hi, my name's Amy Cudney, and I live on Walnut Street near home plate of Roosevelt Park. So I'm representing people going the other direction through that intersection. I work at Flynn Elementary School, and I have two students at BHS. I got an email from my daughter when she was a sophomore that said, "Mom, I think I'm going to be a little late coming home from school today. The wheel of my bike isn't turning very well because I got hit crossing North Champlain." So a car turning right on red. She was in the sidewalk. She had a green light. She tried to cross there, got hit, somehow pedaled the rest of the way to school. I sent her to the school nurse. So my son, with that background of his sister getting hit when she was on the sidewalk, was biking to BHS from home in the street. And you get to the intersection, we've got one lane, and then suddenly it splits into two lanes. But then as a bike, you need to be in the going straight lane. So he was doing that, and he got a pickup truck buzzed behind him and yelled obscenities at him. And so he won't bike to school anymore. I bike through that intersection every day on my way to Flynn, and have sort of learned how to assert myself, but, you know, take the lane and hope that everyone's paying attention. So pedestrians, bikers, either direction, it's not working real well. And I'd really love it if my kids could bike to high school. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Nicole Siegelson, followed by, I think it's Leah Saunders.
Hi, my name is Ruby, and I'm 7 years old, and I walk to school every day, and I see the cars, and they just go by really fast, like there are no lights, and when the roads are wet, they just go by really fast. They don't really seem to care. So, like, they could slip onto the sidewalks and maybe hit someone. I've sometimes seen some cars just go by on a red light. It's like it's not, the red light isn't even there. Like, it's scary, and it's like they should pay attention to the lights and how fast they're going.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. I think, was that Ruby? Who's up? Is Nicole or Leah? Okay, come on.
JP, can you adjust the microphone maybe for her?
Hi, my name's Hazel. I ride my bike to BCS. The cars are turning in way too fast. I don't want to get hit and get dead.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So is Nicole wanting to speak? Nicole?
I just put my name for Ruby.
Okay, great. Willa Saunders, followed by Sharon Busher. Come
My name is Willa, and I bike to school, and I go past that intersection, and personally, I don't feel safe because the cars are going way too fast, and this morning I was watching them, and one of them went through a red light, and I really feel unsafe about that.
Thank you, Willa.
Exactly. So I'm happy to divert the order if it's friendly to you to get any of the last children.
I think that is a good idea. Thank you for
Great.
deferring.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
If you'd like to come up. I'm Missa Aloisi. I live at Strong Street, and my daughter, who's 6, Mira, walks to school every day, walks home from school, and has some concerns about that intersection. We often keep her further back from the edge of the road because visibility is really poor in that area. So even though you may have the crosswalk, knowing that people run the red light, we kind of wait a ways for to make sure it's clear. So before we actually, there's a walk sign, it says you can go. We wait. By the time we wait to make sure it's actually safe, that it's no longer, you're allowed to walk. So the timing is actually really bad at that intersection too. You don't actually have enough time to cross the intersection once you've determined it's safe to. What's the other thing? I think that's it. And we, echo everything else everybody else has said. So,
Thank you very much.
Any other parents, kids?
Hi, my name is Arya. I'm 7 years old. I live on Strong Street, and cars run red lights all the time, and I walk and bike to school. And it's just really scary because a lot of cars run red lights.
awesome. I'm Amelia Potasnik-Kriff, also on Strong Street with Aria, and I have a younger son who's also in first grade. And we moved to Burlington from Dallas in January, and one of the big things that attracted us to the city was the embrace of pedestrian and bike friendliness, and you didn't have to drive anywhere, and there was an amazing neighborhood school just a couple of blocks away, and so that was a huge bonus. But we found that getting down Manhattan feels as bad as trying to bike anywhere in Dallas, where it just doesn't feel like the street was made with pedestrians or bikers in mind, and definitely not with kid-sized pedestrians and bikers in mind. It's, some folks have mentioned an adult can learn to assert themselves on the road. I do it. It's still not comfortable or fun. But for kids, trying to teach them that it is safe and good to ride your bike places, and school is kind of their main practice for that. They haven't experienced that. That intersection at 127 is rough for all the reasons that people here have detailed. Champlain is also difficult because there's no pedestrian, light to get across, but also just like the lack of a bike lane on there or some way to get the kids who are biking to the school safely without riding on the sidewalk, which isn't. I had my son almost get hit by someone backing out of it's just not ideal to ride on a sidewalk, but also definitely not going to have them in the street there. So thank you guys for making time to listen to the concerns, because it's definitely an area that I think is receptive to a design improvement and would make all these kids think a little more positively about using their bodies to get to school instead of driving. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I have you
Oh,
sign?
yes,
You
absolutely.
Take that. All right. Other parents, kids? Sure. Okay, great. Any other parents or kids? Counselor Max Tracy, come on up.
So thanks to commission and all the parents and kids for speaking. I know that it can be sometimes scary to come to a new meeting like this and speak. So thank you for doing this. This is really important that we hear from you about the issues that are facing our neighborhood. So if you don't know, I'm the city councilor, or one of them for the neighborhood. Our other counselors are Perry Freeman and Brian Pine. And we are responsible for trying to listen to things that you have or that you bring to our attention and trying to advocate on your behalf. And that's sort of why I'm here, because Dove contacted me on the issue, and I know that this has been ongoing as an issue in the neighborhood, and so I just wanted to lend my voice to the issue in terms of the 127 Manhattan intersection, in terms of just asking, and that we come up with some sort of plan to address the concerns that have been brought forward in terms of traffic calming there, but also to think more broadly and to put it in the context, I think, of a broader approach to how we deal with intersections. I think that one of the things that I would like to see us develop more of is a Vision Zero policy as a city, which would be a policy really where we focus on these hotspots, these danger points that we are identifying, and then come up with a way that we're really able to address them in a much quicker turnaround. I think one of the issues that I hear is that we get a lot of requests for traffic calming in a lot of different areas, and it can be very difficult to respond to folks in a quick fashion. And I think we're building our knowledge and our toolbox in terms of how we respond in quick or short order to some of these requests with some of the quick build technologies. And I think that can work hand in hand with some of these requests for traffic calming as part of a Vision Zero policy, and that is to sort of define that as a policy whereby we try to bring traffic injuries and fatalities to zero in the city of Burlington. And other cities and entire countries have been successful in doing so by really taking a data-driven, focused approach to some of the most dangerous intersections and areas of the public right-of-way, and actually creating a policy that focuses on them and then addresses them with physical changes to the public right-of-way. And I think that that's something that, in my role as TUC chair or Transportation Committee chair, I'd love to work on with the commission. I think there's a lot of synergy there, especially given that you're responsible under charter for a lot of the on-road stuff, and so I think we have to kind of work together to see how we can actualize something like that. But that's something that comes to mind as a real broader solution to not just think about, to certainly address concerns on particular intersections, but then also to think more broadly. Because, for instance, in the Old North End, I've also heard about concerns on Archibald and Intervale, which is kind of we have a lot of these intersections in town that have these strange geometries that can create longer, more strenuous or challenging crosswalks, especially for kids on the way to school. And so I think that it's got to be focused on these challenging intersections, but also more broad, and to create a framework whereby we're able to address them in a timely fashion. The other issue, and it sort of goes along with this broader thing that I want to, and it's on your agenda tonight, is this idea of the street seats project that we piloted this year. I know Will Clavel's here. I just want to thank him for his work in pushing that out there. I think this is also part of a broader effort that we see on the part of the city to try and look at just our streets as being more flexible and open to change. And I think that it was really cool to see just those streets being used in a very different way than just one car parked in the spaces, one or two cars, as it were, parked in those spaces. The one idea that I had would be to, in addition to maybe having some of them associated with businesses on some times, would be to have ones that are completely unprogrammed, if possible, that are free to folks, or that don't require you to essentially buy something for the business as part of them, because I think that could be helpful, especially when we have the ongoing construction in the park in the downtown, and we're kind of looking for more public spaces in the downtown. So just something to think about. I know that funding is an issue with that, so but that's something that I would look to. But I think it's something that is worth replicating, just because we need to be thinking of our streets as being for all kinds of different users and trying to maximize their use. And this seems like it achieved that goal in a lot of ways. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Great. Councilor Sharon Busher.
Hi.
Thanks for your patience.
Oh, you're welcome. So, in the theme of public safety, I've always wondered, and I know why, but I always felt like police should be present at your meetings, someone from the police department, because oftentimes it's an issue that also needs an enforcement component. And I don't know about the remedies for the 127 issue that was brought up, but I feel that, some attention, immediate attention might help, but that's not a solution. That's just a stopgap. So that's my 2 cents on that. And I did want to report to you on Colchester Avenue, the pedestrian crossing, the flashing light that is there mainly for the university students at Fletcher Place or right before Fletcher Place. Much to my chagrin, I watched at least 3 cars go through that light when it was flashing and people were waiting to cross, and they just ignored it. And actually, this one woman just about took her life in her hands to try to get across the street, and nobody cared. And I was so frustrated, I thought, well, I'm going to call the police and see if well, I shouldn't say that right now, but I thought I would ask them to be somewhere to address this abuse of what is supposed to be a safety enhancement that is being ignored. And I know that that's one of the problems. We talk about stop signs are only effective if people stop. And these lights are only effective if people pay attention to them, but it's very disconcerting to see that. So I'm here to speak about Colchester Avenue. I haven't. You'll know that I don't sometimes give up on things. There's still the issue around adequate parking since we made those changes. I did meet with the president of the university, but did not bring up this topic. But I did meet with Joe Spidell and Lisa Kingsbury afterwards and asked if indeed those spaces off-street by Campus Kitchen could be made somewhat permanent for the Campus Kitchen. And if that was the case, then the spaces that are in your minutes for you to adopt tonight that you talked about at the last meeting, which now have limited time for evenings, they're available for residents. But I'm just wondering if eventually we could go to the point where those spaces would once again be made available for residents full time. I think that would really help. It's amazing what just a few spaces can do to deal with a stressful situation. So I'm still working on that. So I just wanted to report that. But I'm here to speak in support of street seats. I was on the TOOC committee and supported that pilot, and I saw with my own eyes how well it was working. And I read the report in the packet and the feedback, because I go to the TikTok shop all the time, and I saw, people in that area, and it seemed good. And I asked the people at the TikTok shop, and they said, no problem, it's good. And so I was glad to see that the businesses around were supportive. The businesses who were willing to shell out the money felt it was good and wanted to continue. I know some were more successful than others, but I really like this idea. I think the thing that we need to do is balance this with how much parking do we let go of, how many of these do we create, and so that's really it. I don't know whether there needs to be some spacing between where these are all things that you will ponder and consider. But if we can should they be close together, or should there be some distance between them? I don't know. But the concept was a good one. I liked the pilot, and what I loved about this pilot also was the fact that you got the feedback and evaluated whether it was successful or not before you're going to make a decision about moving forward. So I thought it was a very good process. The last thing I wanted to talk about was narrow streets. I know you have a policy to support, and I didn't embrace this a whole lot, as you recall, with Jermaine, Pomeroy, and Archibald. I was really worried about it. I'm not speaking against the policy at all. I understand the issues. What I would have liked to have known was from the residents on Germain, Pomeroy, and Archibald, if there were any problems that surfaced. And I think that I saw some narrowing at the top of Pomeroy because there's a van, the Mary Theater van or whatever it is, and the cars parked there. Sometimes it was difficult to get through, even when there wasn't snow. So I just would like to understand what the people that actually live there thought about that, and who travel that more regularly than I do, because I think that's important information. But that's it. And so I want to thank you, and I want to give a plug to your director. He's working with me on an issue on the Henry Street Market, trying to make that better. Sometimes neighborhood stores are difficult for the surrounding residents, so we're trying to improve that. But I wanted to thank Chapin and Maddie for their work. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
else come on up and sign in? Jason?
Yep. Howdy. So I'm Jason Stuffel, and I live on Colchester Ave. So I kind of had about 3 things to talk about tonight. The first was just kind of a Colchester Ave update. So as you know, they pulled up parking off of the one side and put in the no parking signs there. I thought it was a little unfortunate that the crosswalk to Chase Street has not been there for the entire summer, since people on the lower end of the street had their parking removed there, so they have to now park on the other side, and the crosswalk wasn't installed, and so they still have to walk all the way down to the bottom of the hill or way up to Campus Kitchen to find an actual crosswalk to get across. There is a lot more bike usage on the road just from having that extra space. I see it every day when I look out my window, people going up. Lot more e-bike usage, I can tell you that for sure. I got passed on my e-bike by another e-bike. You see a lot of them out there now. Another point kind of going with that is the emergency vehicles. Part of this was for them, and that's amazing for them now because there is no parking on the one side. Whenever an ambulance or a fire truck has to go down, people part like, wide open, vehicle gets straight through. So that's a huge improvement there. I know there's difficulty with the lines getting in, but cross my fingers for this year. Kind of stinks we lost a whole season of learning and ability of people to be on there. I see people every single day not have those facilities, and it kind of really gets my urgency up that they're needed in a lot of other places too. It's not just at my house where I see it. I know it's a lot of other places in the city where we really need to get there at a faster pace. But so, Colchester Ave, it's getting there. It's just not as fast as I would want, but there are big safety improvements there. I've seen it personally. So I want to thank you for that decision back in June, and we'll see that project through and keep working on that. One thing is I don't feel like there's enough dedicated walk and bike funding. It's just a small drop in the bucket compared to vehicle infrastructure, yet it's not really dedicated anywhere or being sourced from anywhere that that money is going to be there to implement those projects. And one of our problems here is that we need to fast track and implement some projects on a much quicker basis, and where does that money come from? And so trying to identify a steady source of income that you can repeatedly invest in the city is very important. Places like Portland and Copenhagen have not actually invested all that much money over a long period of time. It's just they've done it steadily and build up and build up and build up that infrastructure. They said something like the cost of like one interchange on a freeway is like the amount they spend on the whole city over like 40 years or something like that. So it's not an absurd amount of money. So we need to find out how to get that so we can fast track projects for safety concerns and for the bike infrastructure. And I echo our young residents with, when it feels unsafe, it's unsafe. And I'm an adult and I have to assert myself on these crosswalks, and I do my test step and see if the car will slow down or not, and people will blow right by me. I've had people slide through the intersection at the RFID, RF flashing signs, so there's big flashing signs, they should be able to see it, and they still are just not paying attention. And so whatever we can do to make it so people have to slow down just by construction, not by choice, I think that's really key going forward. And then Jeff Speck came and gave a talk. If you don't know who he is, he's a kind of world-known urban walk-bike planner, and he has kind of a generic talk, but he also personalized it for Burlington. He had a couple nice points. It's available on Local Motion. You can watch the whole thing, but a couple interesting things I thought he said is we have very good bones in streets. The blocks are kind of the right size. He said open up the downtown streets to redo that. We're already doing that. He said you have good plans. You have a lot of good plans about what you should do and everything, but he said 15 years. Time to implement is now. You have good infrastructure, you have good plans, but really you gotta put it in so that people will use the infrastructure and it'll get there. He put up another slide that is to my heart is $10, and it just said $10, and I knew immediately what he was talking about. It's the cost of a year of residential parking in Burlington. He said, is this really what it is? He's like, that is priced way too low. He said, $10 a month is more like what it should be, not a year. And he said, if you actually price it for what it's worth, maybe you'll really cut down on the demand a little bit, and that'll solve some of the issues. Similar to that, he said multiple pricing zones and multiple time zones for your parking, especially like in a downtown core, to keep people incentive to park further and further away. And we have the nice new St. Paul, Great Street, but the parking meter ends at 6 p.m., so I went and parked right next to there for free for a Flynn show. And so it's great for me, but I feel like there's a big demand for people. All the spots there were filled. People were going to the Flynn shows, and it's free. You know, really should be charging for what the demand is. So I think that's something that really should be looked at overall. And then he said about the 4 lanes to 3 for the road diets. He specifically pointed out South Winooski and Battery as just restripe them now. They don't have enough traffic to warrant having 4 lanes there. Making them 3 lanes is very cheap and easy, and it'll make them immediately safer. He identified that as like a do it now. And I couldn't, you're already working on South Winooski, but Battery Street has already been on my mind like that. And he said that you could restripe Battery Street and make it a lot nicer in the spring. And that's just a highway preventing you from getting to our nice waterfront. So make that a nicer street, restripe it. You don't know people going that fast on there. It's 1 lane on either side a couple blocks away. So overall, I just really feel like we need to focus on getting stuff done quicker, and how do we get that done quicker? We've got a lot of good ideas, but it's the funding and getting the implementation done on a much quicker basis. You know, like I said, my daughter is almost 2 now, and with a 15-year plan, she's going to be moving out of Burlington or graduating high school potentially by the time this stuff gets implemented. And so I want a safe route to school for her, like all the parents and children that were here today, where they don't have to worry about 50-mile-an-hour cars coming through the intersection. So, but yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for all their work. And kind of the construction year is coming to an end, but think about what we can do in the off season to prepare for projects in the next year. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jason, I don't know if you had a chance to sign in. And is there anybody else who would like to speak?
Okay, there we go. Thank you, everybody, for speaking. And I know our kids are gone at this point. They snuck behind the camera, but I think public speaking is not easy. So if the kids are still watching, I just wanted to thank them for coming in and being so brave to speak to an issue that's really important to the community. Okay. Item number 4 is the consent agenda, and it was on the screen. We'll dive into it here. It's A through D. In this case, 3 are parking agreements. There it is. The last being an ADA space on Grant Street. Any commissioner discussion on the consent agenda? Please.
I was just going to make a comment that later I spoke with interim director Jeff Padgett about some of the statistics on how many, I know some of the things on our consent agenda item are parking agreements. And we spoke a little bit about how many other parking agreements are already out there. So that'll be part of our discussion later about the generic topic. But I just wanted to point out that'll be something later. And I had a concern about those, how many do we already have out there. But I think we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So that's why I'm willing to.
Yeah, agreed. I like to think we're not voting on a general handoff in this section.
This
here
is
with the
not.
consent
This
agenda.
is, but
just
it's
the
adding
specific-
extra, adding another 15. So I just wanted to make a point that we're going to have more discussion about that. And he has some statistics that he shared with me
That's great.
earlier. So that might.
I too look forward to it. Okay. We just had public comment on this, so we will not go back to the public on this section here. We had commissioner comment. Any other commissioner thoughts on the consent agenda? And do we have an action for moving forward? We have a motion from Commissioner Barr. Seconded, Commissioner O'Neill Vivanco. Thank you very much. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, consent agenda passes. Item number 5. Generic Lakeview College Street garage parking agreement. So now we're into it.
Doesn't this sound like just about the most exciting topic you've ever had? It's generic.
Use the word generic. This is not right.
contracts, It's parking.
Catchy adjectives, Jeff. Catchy.
Yeah, well, I was moving quick because I didn't plan on doing this at this time, but it came to a head and I had to. Anyway.
Fair enough.
So I'm Jeff Padgett. I am the interim director for parking and traffic for Burlington. And so what that means is I'm in charge of the garages. And so what we're here tonight to request is that the Public Works Commission delegate authority to enter into parking agreements to the director. So a parking agreement is basically, in our parking garages, we have groups. So like, say, People's Bank, Ben and Jerry's, Athena Health. These organizations, companies downtown, have parkers. They have employees that need to park downtown, so they buy their passes for them, and they buy them as a group. So we have, like with People's Bank, we have a contract with them that says they can buy up to 200, I think it's 200, whatever. Point is, they can buy up to 200 of these. They can buy a license to park up to 200 cars in the garage. And that's a contract we have with them, and then I can, if I have that contract, I know that I can manage the inventory, right? So I know that we've obligated 1,000 spaces, but I know that our groups have only signed up 800, so I know I have 200 phantom or ghost, obligations, but I can also then look at the inventory, the daily count of the garage, and I can say, okay, they say we've allocated 1,000. They've only said they're going to use 800, but they're actually only parking 600 because they're only parking 3 days a week or 4 days a week or whatever. It's not consistent. So anyway, it's about inventory control. So the reason we're asking for the delegated authority is because we have a number of parking groups that don't have contracts, which means I don't know what that allocated amount is. So like People's Bank, we have a contract with. I know that they could have up to 200, but there's another company called Maximus downtown that they park about 60 or 70 parkers, and that's been the agreement for years, but there's no paperwork on it. There's nothing that says that they can't put in 65 or 70 or 75 or 80. So what I'd like to do is I'm trying to clean up, so to speak, go in and get agreements with all of these companies, and I don't want to have to come to the Public Works Commission every time we need to enter into agreement, because it's sort of it's a business operation for us. They're our customers, and we need to be able to say, yes, we can bring you in, or no, we can't bring you in, we're at our limit. And our job is to manage that inventory. So it's kind of like I want to be able to have sort of a faster, more efficient process to bring companies in. So like there's companies that are moving into downtown right now, like these 3 that are on here now, they're moving into downtown. They're coming into Park, and they had to wait 2 months by the time I talked to them, got, all the information, wrote the memo, got it on the, so it's this protracted timeline. And for them, they're like, I just want to park in your garage. So I would like to be able to say, hey, I've got this standard agreement. Public Works Commission has delegated the authority. I arrange it with them. I look at my inventory. I go, yes, we're good on the inventory. Chapin, we need this contract signed. And then I can move much more quickly and get more parkers in the garage. I don't know how closely you looked at the numbers in the contract in the packet, but we're somewhere around, best I can guess, there's a lot of minutia we could get into, but we're at about 150% or so capacity at the Lakeview garage. But the top deck of the Lakeview garage has got over 100 spaces empty every day. So I know I've got capacity up there, but I don't have I don't have the contract, I don't have the counts, I don't have the solid numbers to give me that confidence that I can just keep bringing people in. So that's what we're looking for, is that authority to enter into these contracts so we can quickly and efficiently manage the parking inventory. That's pretty much it.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Bringing it to the commissioners at this point. Well, we can start right in my eye shot here. Commissioner O'Neill, Vivanco, any questions on this one?
Yeah, and this may fall slightly outside, so tell me if it does. But I guess my concern with some of these parking agreements is, as you're working with these businesses, and we have the Burlington Net Zero Energy Plan, and we're trying to deal with congestion downtown and single occupancy vehicles and so forth, what are we doing about EVSE, the charging infrastructure, and what do we do as a city to communicate to these businesses? These are the priorities of our city as far as encouraging the use of transit, discouraging single occupancy vehicles, encouraging carpool, et cetera, that it isn't just like, oh, we need 600 spots and
Right.
here you go.
So those are bigger policy issues, and what I'm really asking for is a mechanical
So
solution.
you don't, none of that would fall in this agreement.
So these agreements are the mechanical result of that thought process. So we're actually doing that right now. We're actually talking with There are companies that are parking in the Marketplace garage that I've been in contact with, and I'm asking them to move out of the Marketplace garage and move into the Lakeview garage. So that the Marketplace garage is fully a sort of a retail garage, whereas the Lakeview garage is more of a day parker, work, 9 to 5 person type of garage. There's still transients down there, but that's sort of the shift. And they don't like it because it's really close to their office.
We don't like to change.
But anyway, but the point is that it is not because we just want to have this nice on paper being clean thing, right? It's because we want the Marketplace garage to stay open more, right? So there's about 20 some odd spaces that every day are full of work of people that park there all day for 8 hours. Well, we want turnover in that garage, right? Because the more people, it's not about parking more cars. It's about optimally using the garage. So if we have to close the garage because it's full, which we're doing twice a day, 4 to 6 days a week right now, because it's way over capacity. Those cars are driving. They're circling and they're cycling around the city looking for somewhere to park. If we manage that garage properly, they would go in the garage. Maybe that's a bold statement. If we have the opportunity to manage it better and get some of those cars in there. So that's sort of, we're thinking in that direction. That's my point. Absolutely. And as far as chargers, we just got a grant with BED, and they're putting chargers in the Lakeview garage. And boy, it seems like 100 years ago. I forget 2 other places. One just went in on Main Street. One's going to go in, I think, in the St. Paul Street garage. So anyway, those are all policy things that are definitely we're working on, but this is a mechanical thing that we need this sort of, this is like grease to keep us moving and keep us moving quickly, bring businesses in efficiently.
I would just add one thing. The less time Jeff has to spend on the minutia of the mechanics of this, the more time he can spend on Park Burlington efforts like promoting TDM, working with BBA, working with CATMA to promote precisely the kind of ventures you're talking about. And that the more time he spends having to process a bunch of contracts and bring it through the process, the less time there is for the other work.
And to that point is every one of these contracts, theoretically, that I bring to you, if I brought them individually, I really should be running every one of them by the lawyer. So it's not just taking up my time, it's rolling through the city attorney's office too. And the city attorney did review this, and they were okay with. So
As a boilerplate, then?
as a boilerplate, yes. And
So this is a cost efficiency on managing the inventory, a cost efficiency on staff time, as well as.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not a power grab. This is a try to be efficient and operate, really, quite frankly. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Barr?
Sure, I think this is a great initiative. Accountability is key in parking, in the whole parking world, and I also like the idea of trying to look at customers as customers, and those are the folks that you need to have the turnover for, and asking employees to move a block or 2 away and use those vacant spaces. I think this is key. The only thing I would ask is, are there going to be, if we grant this generic, will there be updates for us? Will there be the ability for us to know what's going on and if it's working? And
So every January this is the new schedule, right? Every January, parking, is it January, February? Anyway, early in the year, parking is on the slate, February. Parking is on the slate for Plan B TV presentations. That's a mayoral initiative. BTV stat, I'm sorry. So yes, and this is absolutely, this operating the garages at the optimum level and having spaces available for our leasees is critical. That's the whole point. So yes, absolutely. I have no problem reporting that back to you on some regular basis. Probably February would be a reasonable time. This coming February probably won't have a very good report because we've had a lot of changes in the past year, but I think we can present something.
And the last thing would be, just to follow on with the whole TDM and the climate change in our climate action plan for the city, is the idea of minimizing the hunting for the spaces is key, I think. Mm-hmm. If you can improve the wayfinding, which I think this will help us do, once you categorize, put people in certain places, there'll be more ability for us to send people to one place so that there's not constant circling.
Yes.
So that's key to the congestion, greenhouse gas emissions, all of it. So appreciate it.
And that's a key issue for the downtown businesses also. I hear it from them constantly too. So it's all very, very much on our radar.
That's good, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Barr. Commissioner Hogan?
Yes, can you, excuse me, can you explain a little more about the nature of the legacy contracts that are in place? Like you mentioned, there's a business that we believe parks 60 to 70 vehicles. What's the nature of their contract? Is it just in terms of like the price, but they could show up with 200 vehicles or 10?
Right now, to be fair, I haven't found all of the contracts. They may have had one at some point, but whoever is administering their parkers and me, I can't find it. They can't find it. But they know they've been doing it for like the past 10 years, and they've always been parking about 65 cars. So the big change, what really initiated a lot of this is the migration from the SkiData system to ParkingSoft last October. SkiData was a dumb system. Gates were up every night, so it was very hard to control. ParkingSoft was a smart system. So what it allowed us to do was to say, okay, company, you can manage your own parkers. Here's your parker numbers. Here's your 65 parker numbers. And if you want to add somebody, you just register a new parker, and then you can add them to your group. And when they get fired, you can delete them from your group. So it takes a lot of the administration off of DPW and puts it in the hands of the people that are actually talking to their employees, right? So in the olden days, in order to get a parker on and off, they had to go through DPW. But as of last year, now they can do it themselves. I'm not sure you're aware, but we're doing a lobotomy on the parking garages right now. We're migrating from ParkingSoft to Flex Parks. One of the problems with ParkingSoft, although it was smart, it was not smart enough to create allotments. So it couldn't, an allotment, so 65. So we say, hey, okay, company, you've got 65 parkers. You can only add up to 65. Didn't work that way. They could just keep adding parkers. I had to go in and say, whoa, dudes, no. You got to take 5 or 6 of those guys off and then I go, wait a minute, but I don't have a contract. Maybe we should get a contract. And then I'm like, oh, but that's going to be 3 months out. Okay, I got hotter fires. And then I go work on the hotter fire. So this is like what I'm saying. It's like if I can very quickly pull something off the shelf and say, okay, you guys know you've got 65, right? I know you've got 65. Here's a contract. Let's codify it. And then we're good. And then I know I've got an allotment in the system too, because now we're in that situation where yes, they have 65, but maybe they've only got 50 parkers right now because they just fired 20 people or whatever. Well, I still got those. I still know they're supposed to have 65, and I can still manage that in my inventory, and I can understand my occupancy. So there's a lot of layers. Parking's very complicated.
Sure. That helps. Thank you. And so if there's not a contract that's you can easily point to, it's not like they're coming up on a set cycle that in March that next time it's up, we're going to switch them over. You're sort of...
The way the contract's written is it's self-renewing. It's an annual contract that's self-renewing, and then we have like a 3-month period. I forget what it is, 2 months, 3 months. I don't even remember. That we can cancel them. So if we get to a spot where we've gotten over our skis, we can go and we can figure out who we can adjust their contracts. So, but that's a nuclear option as far as I'm concerned. We should never get to that point where we have to kick somebody out of the garage. No.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Gilman?
Yeah, the question I just had was, I think authorizing you guys to manage the contracts within an allotment. I guess I would think we would want to have some kind of stake in what percentage of the garage and what hours we're allowing you to manage. Just, I don't need to look at every contract. If you say I'm meeting a contract and it's within what we authorized as the percentage or number of slots,
right?
I guess that's what I would like to see as a replacement in case we would at some point want to talk about different policy.
Right. So that speaks to what Jim was saying was we need to report back to you guys what our oversell is.
I understand, but should that be then a votable thing, which is, again, I'm just trying to think of in lieu of approving a 10-slot contract, I should say, okay, you guys can manage within the 800 spots that you want to manage.
Well,
and that's where we weigh in rather than worrying about what every single contract is, as long as it follows the boilerplate. I'm just trying to think through.
Right. So our issue right now is we don't know what our oversell should be. Right now, we're at about 150, and I know that that's absolutely fine.
150%.
150% capacity, but that's a soft estimate based on estimated numbers, so
Yeah, and maybe this is then a follow-up for once you have fixed numbers, because you go close that, you have a contract in place with each of these people who now are floating.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Should we then say, okay, this is our oversell, we're gonna stick within that oversell, we're not gonna oversell more?
Right.
Because I think we would want to then weigh in on, if you're talking about going from 150 to 200, what's the data that supports that?
Right, and right now, I'm just cautious on the data, because the data we
That's
have is thin. I've created.
You don't have good data now.
Don't have good data.
But I would ask that once you have good data, you come back saying, here's our oversell.
Yeah.
And here's the occupancy of the garage with that oversell.
Yep.
We're good, we like this, or we'd actually like to authorization to go up another 50 spots.
Absolutely. I think that's the vision I have also, is,
So can we?
We formalize that as a
Yeah.
follow-up,
So
once you
part of the
close it,
motion.
and then I'm good.
Right, so maybe part of the motion could be that the commission requires us, when we come in February to give our annual report, to give you the oversell percent that we want to target to, and the commission can authorize that at that point.
As well as the data that supports that that's the right number, based on occupancy.
well, to be clear, the data this February is still going to be rougher than it will be in subsequent years. So I think it's appropriate to come on an annual basis and tell you what the oversell is, and have you guys endorse it and understand why. Because it may bounce around every year for a number of years until we settle in on what the right number is. Because we're going to play it conservative. We're not going to go up to 400%. Still be conservative and inch it up in play. So absolutely, there's.
Okay. Great. I just think that's the right, to me, that's the right replacement for us voting on every contract. We should be voting on the capacity allocated, not that each contract is using the same boilerplate each time 45 days after you want to do it. So, in my opinion. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Overby.
I think that was sort of, Jeff and I had a conversation right before the meeting about a lot of these statistics, so I know they're moving target, and I would, basically piggybacking on what you just said, one of the suggestions that I had was to somehow have in the document, in the contract, that this is a general one, that the Public Works Commission does actually get some sort of reports on the percentages of the usage and what the percentage usage is in the oversell. And when you brought that up, it sounds to me that maybe this delegation could be done this first time around just for a year until we get settled out, and then you'll get a report. I think it's probably going to work out fine, but I think that was my concern as well, that we didn't know, even with the first one, the 3 that we just approved on the consent agenda, I was concerned we're throwing another 5 in there, and I know we've been doing this, and what's the numbers? And Jeff has really been working hard on the numbers, and so he showed me a lot.
What if we could delegate until a year from February, since that's sort of the
Absolutely.
window,
Well, that's
meeting for 15 months or whatever that is to reach that?
I would say
Right.
that would be a good idea, because it lets you settle out everything, and then it'll be pretty much easier for us to know how much the oversell is, and some of all those phantom spots that are, this organization, what was the Filene's has 300 spots available?
Yeah.
So something like that is okay, well, what do they really use? And it's not them anymore. So there's some funny stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
there's stuff to work out.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think an annual delegation renewing in February contingent on this report
That's
is
what we vote
perfectly
on each year
reasonable.
is, Are we good with the way the management has been going and approving it for the next 12 months till the next report?
That would work. That would work great for me too. I had a separate question that was related to Commissioner O'Neill Vivanka. I'm sorry, I say your last name terribly, but I should practice before I get to the meeting. One of the questions I had related to this is: has there been any expressed demand for EV spots with this? I mean, one of the things that might be anticipated is the possibility of that as an option. Now, that's, again, we can maybe visit that in, a year from February, but, that may be something that would be related to your contract that somebody might be wanting. Has anybody expressed any interest in any people that you've been discussing with, that they would like to have an EV spot for one of their parking spots?
Nobody specifically asked for one, but there's one going in soon, and we definitely have a vision of putting more in. It's just a funding and, priorities issue at this point, frankly.
I was just thinking, since it's related, if in fact that is a demand we have, we know these thousand people want to park, do we want to take the opportunity, you're doing a lot of work, of communicating with all these people, getting some input on, would you prefer to have an EV parking spot versus just a generic parking spot? Just a thought.
One of the upsides of the new brains that we're putting in is we, as part of the migration from the old system to the new system, is we're ensuring that every single credential, so your barcode or your Prox card or whatever is getting you in the garage, that piece of credential is connected to a human being, and that human being has an email. So that we can reach out and send a mass email to all of our parkers and do a survey, quality control survey. Do you want EV survey? Do you, what's your experience in the garage survey? Whatever, So yes, we're thinking along those same lines.
How is the payment? I know I was looking at the way that the billing thing is. When you explain that the process is that the groups actually will manage their own assignments to their designated parkers within their group. How is the billing done? Is that done, do you get some sort of report from the new, what's it called, the parking software that then you bill from? Or is that part of an integrated thing that they're debited automatically? Or does the city have to send them a bill, like it says in this, it says payment, they'll get a bill at the first of the month following the effective date or something?
Right. So Flex Parks manages the bills, manages the whole billing process. So the invoice is generated on the last day of the month because we're billing them for the subsequent month. We're invoicing them ahead of time. If they are paying with their credit card, they're billed instantly. So they're literally paying ahead of time. If they don't pay with their credit card, they get billed and they have to pay within 25 days, so that we don't do the goofy thing where it's 30 days, but February has 28 days, then your bill is due in March. So anyway, so yes, so people that are auto-paying are paying ahead. People that are paying with a check are getting the invoice and they're writing a check and mailing it in within 25
On
days.
an individual basis, not the group?
Oh, the groups are managed fundamentally the same way. They tend to like invoices more because they're corporate and they need to do their writing off and all that stuff.
Well, I was getting at the ones that are the group ones that you've said you've delegated to them.
Right.
The management of signing people up for the pass instead of the city. So those people are somehow getting a bulk bill for however many people they've issued passes for using the parking Flex Park software.
Right. So this is a big improvement from Parking Soft to Flex Parks. Flex Parks is the new one. A big improvement is that as soon as someone signed up and as soon as they use that pass, they get billed for the entire month. Whereas in Parking Soft, you could add somebody on the 2nd of the month and take them off on the 28th of the month, and they got billed at the end of the month. They didn't get billed for any of that parking. So we have a much better system, much better control now. So one of the many, many reasons why we're migrating from that platform to the new platform.
One last thing. I remember I was questioning the rate, it was being an underline, it's blank, and as you told me that the actual $80 a month is in the ordinance for a 5-day pass, and the $96 is in the city ordinance already for the 6-day pass. So that was not something that, that in your delegated, you can just willy-nilly decide.
No.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, so that's
we're
something
constrained
that
on that.
I had a question about, which I didn't know if other people, had seen that as well, so. All right, those are my comments.
Thank you very much. I sometimes dress like a phantom, so I may not be in your count, so you may want to take that into consideration. No questions from me. We can,
I had one other fact.
oh, I'm sorry, yeah, please.
No, because we started talking about EVs. I'm just curious, and it might be a larger discussion, but are there time limits for the EV charging? Because if somebody stays there and parks all day, then that means you might have to get a lot more chargers. Because I look at that as workplace charging versus public charging, so.
Right. Currently, the important piece, there is no time limit on charging, and the other piece is there are no assigned spaces in the garage. So these garages are public facilities, and they all need to handle some level of transient parkers. So there's no way to say you get this space that has an EV charger and you that don't have an EV car. But we have garages with multiple chargers in them, and Jeff is continuing to add. I mean, across from Hotel Vermont in the Lakeview garage, we have 4 or 5 chargers already that are well used, and Marketplace has a fast charge, level 3, and we're adding more. So it'll be interesting to hear now that we have the ability to communicate directly via email with our monthly parkers, whether they want it. But as we look at who uses charging stations, it's not the people commuting into work, because most electric cars now handle the range from home to work, and people charge back at home. It's really the more transient people coming to one of the hotels who are looking for the charging stations. And currently, we haven't heard from the hotels that we've been oversubscribed, to my knowledge.
I haven't, no.
Okay.
No.
So,
Just something to look at in the future, because as
Yeah.
more EVs are on the road.
That's right.
Absolutely.
More turnover.
Yeah.
There's, the behavior of the garages is going to change in the next 10 years in a lot of interesting ways.
Good question. Thank you. I didn't mean to cut off fellow commissioners, please.
Oh, go ahead, when you're.
I think you were done, yes?
I am done.
The one last thing, this is just specific to the College Street Lakeview garage at this point, and then not the other municipal garages.
We are not selling monthly passes at the Marketplace garage anymore. We have those 20 or so legacies that are in there that we're trying to move out of there. But no,
What about
just
the
like-
one that's down by the waterfront?
Those are managed by Parks and Rec.
The one that's behind that nobody can find, but it's a great parking garage.
Oh, Melinda Moulton's Main Street landing lot on the behind of King Street?
You sort of come in from the back way there.
That's a private
I mean,
lot.
is that a private lot?
Yes, that's a private
Okay.
lot. That's not a city lot.
Never mind.
Yeah. And Jeff, just, the Marketplace Garage has the lower monthly parking
Oh, yes.
agreements for the lower spaces.
Yes, it does.
So are you looking to get approval to be signing agreements for those spaces?
No, this is just for Lakeview College.
Marketplace has two sections. There's a private level down below, private, has separate gate, that we have monthly parkers for, 47 spaces or
Like that.
something?
And that's a very different lot because there's no transient use of that lot. So if there's 50 spaces, we sell 50 passes because it's a gated thing and the only people who go in are those people. So I'm not looking, that's a different beast altogether.
So do we need to make some proposed language to modify that about the authorization is from, goes until February, February 2021?
So
Do we need to make a?
just technically, I look at the recommended motion from the packet. It says that PwC approves the attached generic parking agreement to be used for contracts with parking group license holders pertaining to this garage, and delegates the authority to enter these contracts to the Director of Public Works. So I suppose we would amend that to ask for an annual revisit on, do we want to specify to what purpose? Is it the oversell, or is it other?
Yeah, I was
Or keep
thinking
it
that the
generic.
way that we had worded it is that we would actually be just reviewing the magnitude of the permits that have been issued and the percentage oversell. I mean, the information that you have already is really structured very well. Jeff showed me
So then maybe-
So we just need that kind of report so that we know how are we doing.
So our motion is to delegate this authority till February of 2021, with the expectation then that we would receive a report on oversell and utilization rates to approve additional delegation for a time period currently projected to be a year after that.
Yeah, right, all right, so an annual renewal.
Is that your motion?
Yeah, roughly.
We're technically gonna go to public comment before we get into that.
Oh, that's true. Sorry.
But we're in the commissioner discussion phase. Sorry, Jeff, I don't mean to.
I would welcome a broader statement of just general approval by you guys, whether, and you can prescribe that we provide you with information on oversell, but, it's really, you guys have that authority, so I just don't want you to get your motion so constrained that it's only those things, and, if you have some bigger philosophical problem that comes up that we're not thinking about now, but manifests itself over the next year.
But can we approve for a time period? So for now, just say approval for 15 months, because.
Sure.
If they don't bring us
With
what-
the report-
if
and the
they don't
report
bring us
back.
what we want in 15 months, then we don't have to approve it again. Right, so that's why we
Right,
can be
that's-
more, why we can be simpler, we don't have to
Yeah,
specify our
I'm looking
motion.
for simple. That's what I'm looking for.
You're the public, do you have a comment?
I do have one.
Ironically, we're going to public comment.
I mean,
Take
that
it.
was.
She just couldn't help herself.
There's
I
lots of
should have
segues. I love
stayed,
it.
but anyways. So I just wanted to understand, I support this streamlining this process. It makes total sense to me. And I valued the conversation. So most of my questions got answered by all of you asking them for me. But how many spaces are there that you actually lease currently? 100, did you say 150?
There's 1,200 spaces.
Yeah, but how
total
many-
in the garage.
And how many do you lease? How many would be subject to being leased?
Right now, there are, because we're working on this data migration right now, that's why I have these numbers in my
Right,
head.
no, just approximately, I'm not holding you.
Yeah, I sent out emails to about 900, but that's not, I can show this to you afterwards, this is a better way to do it. But
So.
right now, there's 947, and this, as of June, when I did this analysis, there were 947 people that were either individual parkers or in a group, so those are leases.
And the number of total spaces in the garage are what?
1,200.
So my question is, what percentage do you want public? I was trying to figure this out. I appreciate your point of oversell, et cetera, but to me, it's really germane to hold whatever you want public available for the public.
Right.
And I don't think you should cross that line. So I'm going to speak against crossing that line until you get the report in February. I know that ties his hands somewhat, but I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable
No,
with
that's-
that. So.
That was one of my questions, was what are the number that, like, you can't go sell 1,200 right now just because it feels right if you've sold 950. So like, are you looking for a number to be authorized to then manage within at this moment?
Right, well, what number do you feel that you need to hold open for the public?
I would need data to know
It's
that.
the same way, I mean, we're asking the same question, just a different way, but.
And what I think we're requesting, and I think what you're proposing in your motion, is that they give us a year and some odd months to develop that number, because we don't know it right now.
Okay, so I want to be really clear. I don't know enough about this site to know how many people from the public depend on, when they're going downtown, needing, say, hey, here's a parking garage, here's where I go to park. So I don't want them to come and find full all the time because you've leased out all the spaces. So that's my problem here. And I'm not hearing a response that makes me give me warm fuzzies, because I don't feel like I know that there will be, if it's one space that's open to the public, that doesn't work. If it's 100 spaces, well, maybe that's okay. I don't have a way of knowing that. So I'm not trying to really tie your hands, but I really feel like it's really germane for the public and all of you to know how many spaces really are available to the public on an average, on a regular basis. That's what I'm really trying to figure out.
Current state, what's?
This parking garage is full one day a year. It's July 3rd. There are hundreds of spaces available. We are not looking to compromise the general public, and we are being very careful in how we allot. But to the extent that it takes us 45 days to sign an agreement for a business that wants to locate downtown, we really struggle with being responsive and bring business downtown. To your point, there is a percent of oversell that is necessary to protect our financial collective interests and be able to maintain the garages. But I hope you'd all see that other than July 3rd, this garage has a boundless amount of, the public is available to use it 24/7 and is using it 24/7. If part of what you're looking for is a strict number of percent oversell. That's what we are seeking to bring you. And hopefully in this coming February, we'll have some draft numbers for you. But as of right now, I can tell you there's probably 700, 800 spaces available in that garage, if not more. And then peak time during the day, it's 100 plus. Yep.
So I think that was misunderstood. I'm, once again, not trying to tie your hands. I support moving forward. I just feel that I understand the garage is not utilized very much. I don't know if all of those people are, I don't know what that means either. I mean, if there are 100 people in there on a regular basis, then I would be proposing that maybe 100 spaces should always be kind of freed up for the public.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for some vague number
Right.
that we know and still allows you to pretty much oversell is a lot of, anyways, that's all. That's what I'm looking for. I want to be able to be responsive to the public who might say, well, why did you do that? Well, I didn't do it anyways, but why did you speak in support? I'm just adding that cautionary statement. That's it. Thank you.
So will you have some rough numbers then, rough enough to give us a better, I know, just we talked about February being kind of short. But
Yes, I mean, I have rough numbers right now, but I want them to be better. And this delegated authority really doesn't affect, I mean, right now, my primary goal in this delegated authority is to get everybody who we've already got in there signed up properly. The decision about how to move forward with new contracts, if somebody comes in asking for 200 spaces, I got to have a heck of a lot better number, a harder edge on that oversell. The issue is that every single parking garage is completely different. Some parking garages operate at 99% because, like the airport, if you show up at the airport and you're going to go get on a plane, you have to have somewhere to park. There's no oversell capacity there because they have to have a space for everybody that shows up. But for some, and in some communities, you can oversell at 120%. Some communities you can sell at 200% or 225. Every community is completely different, and we don't know what that number is. So that's why I bristle a little bit at that number, because what I'm asking for is the authority to actually manage the garage to the point where we can get a number and set a goal. Just exactly.
And,
what
I'm going to use chair precedent here just for a moment and give a little perspective on all this, right? Because we're voting on these generally this one agreement, and I think based on what's been discussed, there's a respect for that hunt for numbers, and that we're essentially trusting that, look, we all really want this to stay public, right? We know that there needs to be a percentage of that public. We don't know what that number is, and so we're just saying we trust you right now, and then of course putting a little leash on that by saying we want to come back at the end of the year and do that. So
I'm just wondering, is it worth, Jeff, if you had someone come for 50 spots, would you sell that right now? What is the utilization number that you would set as a ceiling at the moment before signing an additional agreement within this approval in the next 15 months?
Right now, I wouldn't, because I don't have the data to support that answer. I am bringing on individuals that are coming in little bits and pieces, and I'm bringing these small companies in, these 5s and 10s. But, somebody comes in with 50, I'm not bringing them in. We brought Athena in this summer at 100, and that's part of the reason I did this, because I needed a straight face that Athena was coming. And this was before me. They've got a contract and all that stuff. So right now I wouldn't, because I don't feel like I have the numbers. Come January, February, I should start getting some numbers. But yes, and I appreciate that's why we're coming, and that's why we're having this discussion. We are asking you to trust us with the management of the garage.
Commissioner Barr had a question for you.
I just wanted to point out something that, based on the numbers that he gave us, the 942 and the 1,200 spaces, that's roughly a 79% occupancy by leased or contract. And given the strategy of trying to move people out of the garage on Cherry Street and down there, it's because the demand is more on Cherry Street. So I guess based on the vacancy rate in the Lakeside garage, and the percentage of current contracts that you need to codify but exist, 942, 80% or 79% is a pretty good rate, I would say. That's going to give them enough based on occupancy rates that they already know, that they're in a much better position from a parking standpoint, from my experience. So I feel very comfortable with these numbers.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Barr. Commissioner Hogan, I think I saw you maybe with a question. I'm not sure if you had one. Okay, my bad. Other commissioners with follow-up questions? Commissioner Overby?
I was just going to say, the numbers that Jeff and I looked at earlier, there was like something like 470 daily people coming in and out of the parking garage. And I think, so I had some of the same concerns about what the numbers, how do you figure out whether we want to even do these 15 that we just did in the consent agenda? Did we want to add 15 more people? But, so I think we really don't know. There's 470, that might help, Councilor Busher, that's a number that he had sort of given to me. That's an average of how many people just come in and go out on a daily basis and use it. Then you do have those 900 some people that have passes, but then there's a whole bunch of, there's hundreds more that have the ability to get passes that maybe aren't necessarily using them. So there's
Right, that's
there's
the thing,
more.
is I've got ghosts.
And this is why it's so important that we need to have those numbers, actually figured out. When you have software that can actually figure it out, and it's more accurate. So I feel like we are going to maybe have some weird stuff happening, and I'm happy to hear that you're not going to be signing up another 50 people because now you can do it without coming here and telling us about it. I realize that. That's great.
Yeah, that's not the goal at all.
Right, and I think that we just need to have that, we need to have to come back and go, here's now, I've got everybody lined up with their contracts, I know I'm not gonna have to see, these people aren't gonna go up to 200 all of a sudden, because we did agree, in 1981, to give them up to 200, and, now it's 2019, and, that's still out there as a commitment. And so that's a big worry, I think, right now. There's how many? Several hundred. I mean, like 600, 800 of commitments made that we don't really know if they're going to ever, happen. So, I really think we need the numbers. I think I'm comfortable that we give you that time to get these all cleaned up, and maybe a few little companies can do it, but we really need to see what happens with it in the next year, because anything could happen over the next year.
Right.
And you're going to discover it, and we're going to go, and then the concern about, do we want to have even maybe certain portion of the parking garage, which is specifically available for people that are transient coming to town, that's the easiest to access to the downtown. The signage, we've talked about this, signage is not easy, you can't find your way into that parking deck, that garage, and it's hard to find your way out of there to, Church Street. So all of that is stuff that I know is related to this. So we can solve this problem, he can clean things up, he can maybe deal with a couple small contracts that we see. We get them back again with the data, and then we can review it again. That's where I'm at with that. But I like the time frame that we actually have a February 2020, February 2021. We see what you've got, where we're at, and then we can maybe set some of those specific areas for public parking that's very easily accessible to the downtown. That might be something we'll think about.
At that point, logically, I should have a number that I can bring to you and say, this is why 167% is the perfect number based on this data. That's the point, is I should know that number.
And if 470, or if it's 500 a day, then we know that we really want to make available at least that much of the area that would be easily accessible for the people that want to shop and be in town on a transient basis.
Okay, well, it sounds like we're pretty well
Right.
in agreement in a direction here.
I think so.
Any other questions in this regard?
I don't have any other
On this
questions.
side of the table, any other questions on this side of the table? Anyone care to move forward with this on a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept that with that time frame, that we're going to extend the time frame of the authorization for this delegation is until February of 2021, or when the report comes in, that we have some data to assess how things are going.
Okay, so we're approving, the motion is for the language in our packet plus essentially approving
Enter
it
into these contracts.
through February 2021?
Through February 2021, or whenever they bring the report to us, but
Yep.
that's fine.
Yep, and then it expires at that point.
And if I understood from what Chris said, and getting an annual report every February every February commission.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
that ideally
Or
would
reapprove.
coincide with your ask for what you want to adjust for the following 12.
Exactly, yeah. No, I think that's eminently
Okay, that's
reasonable.
fair. Poor Holly over there is writing fervently.
Second.
Hoping.
Second.
Are you good with this, Holly, as far as the language? She's easy like that. Okay. All right. So we have a motion, Commissioner Overby, seconded
second.
Commissioner Goodman. Any discussion on this motion? Okay. Seeing none, we go to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Motion passes. Thanks for working with us on this one. Good work, Jeff.
Confidence.
That closes item number 5. We are on to item number 6, Street Seats and Parklets Program.
All right. Hi, everyone. So we are here to give a follow-up to the pilot that CEDO and DPW conducted this summer. You all know I'm Elizabeth Goringer from DPW.
And I'm Will Clavel from CEDO.
Great. So we're going to jump right in. Okay, that worked. So just a quick recap of how the process started out. We did issue an RFP. We received 5 applications. We permitted 4 to advance, and 3 were successfully installed. That's the Archives, El Cortijo, and Restaurant Poco, with their business hours listed. And all of those locations were successfully installed and open to the public outside of business hours. And you can see from the business hours shown that the locations had a good mix of public and private hours between the 3 of them. All right. And so we did want to make sure that we were pretty thorough and very thoughtful about the way that we collected feedback and evaluated this pilot for success. So we had a variety of methods that we were using, public surveys that anyone could use if they have a smartphone, use their smartphone to scan a QR code at a sign at the parklet location and take an online survey. Host business surveys, so different surveys that were administered directly to the hosting businesses of the 3 locations. Will and I went and spoke with 5 different businesses adjacent to the parklets, so nearby neighbors to see how they were impacted, as well as, we looked at social media feedback and some emails and phone calls that we received.
So with the lengthy memo we submitted, we included all the feedback that Elizabeth just talked about. We just wanted to quickly highlight a couple of the key takeaways. Happy to report there were no safety issues during the pilot program. None of the businesses that hosted the parklets or the adjacent businesses reported any negative impacts on deliveries or unwanted behavior in the parklets, which was a positive. There was a little bit of concern from one adjacent business about parking in general downtown, but they did say that they enjoyed the parklet and added some vibrancy to the street. So one of the questions we asked is, at the end of this pilot, would you prefer to see a parklet in this space or return it to parking? 86% wanted to see 86% wanted to see the parklet or street seat, 7% wanted to see parking, and 7 were undecided.
And going off of that, we also asked if people in general would like to see more street seats or parklets in Burlington. And of the 58 people who responded to the survey, 88% said that they would like to see more in the future. And we also wanted to highlight this piece of data, which I'll just quickly explain how this question was set up. So the question was, do you think that street seats should be fully open to the public, fully dedicated to businesses, business patrons, or some combination of public and private hours? So people could sort of slide their answer from 0 to 100, 0 being fully public, 100 being fully private, and the total average was 57, so pretty much close to the middle of those 2 options.
So what are the next steps? The host businesses, adjacent businesses, and survey respondents seem to support a continuation of this program. So our team here is working on a draft parklet program guide. We're really hoping to get your impact and feedback especially on a couple input and feedback, especially on a couple elements that we'll bring up in a second here. We're going to incorporate that feedback into this program guide, come back to you in November, as well as the TUC and the license committee to share that finalized guide with you. And two of the main things we want to get your input on are the following.
Yeah, so a couple things that we're still considering are the number of parking spaces that we should allow to be encumbered through this program. Is that a citywide cap, or is that just a downtown cap? What we're currently considering is 10 encumbered parking spaces in the downtown, and then not having a restriction for the city as a whole, but something that we are, interested to hear from you guys about. And as well, we do want to acknowledge that we heard some concerns around perception with public access or lack of public access or public seating at the locations. And I think this could be due to a variety of things, but I'll say quickly that at El Cortijo, when they first opened up their parklet, they were using some posts with a chain across the front to sort of channelize the movement of people in and out of the space during their business hours, and because there were 2 parking meter posts that were left during the pilot that they wanted to guide people around. And I think that visually having this these posts with a chain, even though there was room to get in and out, combined with the seats that they had to chain up during their off hours because they could easily walk away, contributed to a perception from people if you were walking by that maybe this wasn't a public space. So we do want to recognize that. And because of that, we have taken that under consideration, and we plan to, what we're currently considering is requiring that all locations include built-in public seating that's permanent, that will work when the business is open or for when the public's there, and we hope that will help alleviate some of that perception in the future. And then just along with that, we do want to also point out that despite some of those remarks that we did receive, about 22% of survey respondents from who were visiting El Cortijo were visiting during public hours, so when the business was not open. And more than 50% of survey respondents were visiting the archives or Restaurant Poco during their public hours.
Great. And the second point that we really want your input on is the parking fee structure. Should we be charging a flat fee for everybody that hosts a parklet? Should we be looking at a prorated approach where they would be charged based on the number of private versus public hours that they have? Using the chart on the right here, Business A as one example, the archives, if they're public up until 4 o'clock, and then it turns into private space from 4 p.m. to 2 p.m., they would be charged a certain amount depending on whether they're a smart meter or an older meter. In this case, it was $1,000 to encumber that space. A more restrictive parklet that has more private hours is private from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., would be paying just under $4,000 to encumber that space. And then a fully public parklet that is open to the public at all times would just be paying the dollar per square foot encumbrance fee. Or we could look at a flat fee approach with a flat fee up front with a prorated approach on top of that. We'd love to get your input. We feel like this chart on the right and a prorated approach incentivizes businesses to have these parklets open to the public as long as possible, or they'll be paying for it. The revenue that they pay could then be used for the next year to potentially fund a fully public parklet, but we wanted to really get your input on the parking fee structure and what your thoughts are.
What is the time frame that you're giving these figures for? What is $1,000? What does that mean?
That's the time frame was the amount of time we had the parking pilot from May 1st to October 1st.
Yeah.
And you considering that a contract year?
What do you mean by a contract year?
Usage of that spot, essentially.
That would be, those are roughly the dates that we're looking at for the program in the future, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, any input you have, and especially on the number of spaces, especially as it relates to downtown and the parking fee structure, would be much appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it.
bring it to commissioners. Commissioner Overby, we can start with you on this one.
This one I'd really love to spend some time thinking about. I really feel like I can't come up with a good suggestion for you on that one, but I think you're onto it as far as prioritizing a certain, making the cost relative to something else. One of the things that I was happy to hear you talking about is that issue of the chaining of the seats, because I read, enough of it was sort of, if they did have their own seats and they tied them up, that's not going to be a public space, really, if you stand around in there. So that's, I think, an important maybe design thing that has to be added in. The other thing that maybe happened, one of the other comments was about signage. Maybe there could be some signage that says it's public, outside the restaurant hours, because maybe that, I think one of the comments was that it wasn't. It just really appeared not public. So maybe if there was actually something that says this is public in non-business hours. The other comment that was made by one of them, I think, was extending the dates besides that May 1st to October 1st thing so that people could use those little heater things. So I know I had that comment when we first started the pilot. Maybe October 1st is a little bit soon if you're going to have foliage people in town, so that might be a little early. And one of the other comments that was made sort of on the side by the archives survey people was that they chose their business location because they had to be in downtown, because if you're any block away or two, you don't get any business. And so what I'm thinking that might clue you into that you might want to prioritize some of the spots to the spots that are on the side streets where there's going to, where people will come to the top of Church Street and they look to the left and they look to the right, or they look to the left and it looks dead. So finding ways to make those go in places where you're trying to expand the liveliness of sections of downtown. If it appears that's, if you don't have your business downtown, forget it. Nobody will walk there, which is what was said. And I think that the comment that your suggestion about public seating being available all the time when they're closed, I think is really an important one, so that they can't just lock up the seats. So that was I think my one of the things that stood out to me about the comments, that it really isn't public if there's no place to sit. And so I think that's the comments that I have.
Do you feel like the built-in seating addresses that?
I think that if you had bench seating or something,
Yep.
And I don't know, obviously they're going to have little tables and chairs. So I think that they spent money to build them the way they did, but I think some method to leave something usable that isn't going to walk away, that people can sit on in the off hours, is a good thing.
Okay.
And not the appearance of chains on things, and particularly letting people know there's some signage that says, the public is welcome. And I thought it was interesting that the archives said, oh, we didn't discriminate. We said, anybody can be there. We didn't say restaurant patrons only during off, business hours. And I think that was actually to their advantage. And so, but it might be uncomfortable for other places. So I think in the long run, that may be the better course. And it might be you just have something that says, patrons will be, if somebody needs a seat and you're just sitting there. I don't know how you would do that, but if somebody wanted to have food. So some other mechanism to leave it open to the public unless somebody wants to have their meal there or something like that. So I think that the bench seating may be a way around it, something that's not going to walk away.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Overby. Commissioner Goodman.
Yeah, I mean, I think high level 10 seems like a good number to start with as sort of a limit to sort of frame this. I think we don't know, I don't know where this could go over time, but I think for now it's a good ballpark to not sort of be looking for hundreds or dozens of these things. I think thinking about it from incentivizing people to leave these open more often and structuring the rate structure in that way makes a lot of sense. I think thinking about it from the perspective of what's the value of that parking spot is one. I guess I found them very positive, and so the question would be, what's the rate structure that the additional business can support? Are we going to cause these not to happen if we structure them in such a way? So I don't know what the right rate is that would cause these not to be built at this point. So anyway, that's just another thought as well. So I saw you tried to ask that question of the 3 pilots. It wasn't clear what the answers were, sort of in what you presented, so I'm not sure. Did we charge anything in the pilot?
So we did not charge for parking, but we charged for the encumbrance
So the
fee, which is
one-
the $1 per square foot. Yeah, so.
It seemed like only one said they might be able to afford this proposed rate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And others said they wouldn't have.
Right.
So
Which is, we did ask if they would be able to pay about $4,000. So we didn't ask, would you
Which
be
is the
willing to
max,
pay
yeah.
$1,000?
The max,
Would
yeah.
you be willing to pay $3,000? So we only have that one number to go off of from their responses, but.
I guess that, I don't know if, before we approve this, we should be thinking about, I don't know if in your fact-finding on others who might be interested, you could come back with, I don't know the best way to frame that. Obviously, we should try and get what we can, but I also don't want this not to happen because we say, we're gonna go for $4,000, and then no one comes forward and we don't gain this benefit, so. I don't know, that's my thought on the rates, is it would be helpful to understand what we think the market can bear or what others have been able to get. Again, maybe just by asking people, what are you willing to pay, they're gonna say nothing, of course. But if people in other cities have done this successfully and gotten a certain rate, that would be helpful to understand relative to helping us to set a rate structure, so.
Once we get your feedback today, we'll be working on a draft rate structure. We can certainly shop it with the businesses downtown, compare with other partners nationally, and bring you next month a proposed rate structure that we think is gonna be viable.
That would be helpful for me. Again, understand, this is a concept,
Yeah.
so, but that would be my feedback, is again, I would like to see some of this happen. Again, not everyone in the whole city having these, but it's tough to know if it won't happen at all if you set the rate structure a certain way, and we're gonna be coming back in 2 years saying, man, we wish we'd set it at a different rate, so that would be my feedback. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Gilman. Commissioner Hogan.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and I agree with what Commissioner Gilman was saying about sort of not wanting to price people out. I think, considering that this use of, 20 feet of curb space or whatever it is, can get more people through it in more dynamic ways that are, I think certainly valuable to some of the businesses that hosted it, and compared to what's happening after October 1st with that 20 feet of curb space. I think you want to would kind of err on the side of making this a desirable thing for potential hosts, and err less on the side of exact cost accounting for if somebody was feeding the meter 24/7 for those 6 months or whatever it is. That's my quick take on it now. But yeah, I look forward to continuing discussion next month.
That's a good point. We didn't really mention the other benefits, the increased gross receipts tax that I think one of the businesses said it probably was 2 to 3%, and then 2 of the businesses hired new employees to help staff these parklets, so it created some jobs through the program. So there's some other community benefits that aren't necessarily reflected in
Sure.
the parking fees.
And there's intangibles that it's just more exciting, more vibrant to walk past
Yep.
that than a parked vehicle. Say, like,
Thank you.
I don't know, there's not a dollar figure for that in that table, but
Yeah.
I think it's,
Yeah.
we want to be acknowledging that as well. So, thanks.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Barr.
Thanks. Also agree, that was a great presentation. I'm just a little confused maybe about the difference between the downtown, the 10, and the no number 4 outside. How far out from the core are you talking? Did I miss it? Are we talking neighborhoods? Are we talking just the streets around there?
So, are you asking how far, in terms of, is there like a limit for the entire program as a whole?
Right, I mean, the whole city of Burlington,
whole
is there going to
city.
be one on Chase Street where I live? Is there going to?
Yeah, so
There could
what
be.
we were thinking is we would not give a geographic restricted area. We would, because we think, some neighborhood groups might be interested, and if they're in a residential area,
My
see what
neighborhood's
they come
working
up
on
with.
something like this right now,
See
so
what
this might
they-
be really
see
cool.
what people propose.
We're already talking about this, so this might just dovetail perfectly. But, so my thought is too, was the intent of this program to have downtown businesses sponsor something in neighborhoods, or is it just
Not exactly, no.
Buy it, you use it, and so, okay.
Oh, yeah. The funding mechanism would have to be explored for some of those neighborhood ones.
Because I'm actually thinking in my neighborhood about, we're trying to repurpose some green space, a little triangle there, and this sounds like the perfect idea for it. But then again, how would we come up with the money to do it? So those are the questions that I would have, the stuff that's outside
But
that
if you
10.
look at that chart,
Mm-hmm,
and if it was open to the public, you would be paying a different rate.
mm-hmm. But I'd be paying it, so I guess I'm just trying to figure,
There would be the
not that I'm not against me paying, but I'm just saying, I do live in a neighborhood, and I'll just use mine as an example. I live in a neighborhood where there's a lot of property owners that don't live there. They have a lot of apartments and things, and so I don't know that maybe we'd get them to donate, maybe we wouldn't. It's just to make it vibrant. I'm just curious, that maybe there's funds, grants, scholarships, things like that, so.
Yeah. Yeah, so while like in your neighborhood, while the parking fees would be a lot lower, you'd still have to build the thing, and we've a couple of different sources to do that. The MPAs just got a boost in their budgets. The city councilors all have discretionary funds. I don't know the exact name of them, and then a lot of these have artwork on them. Some of the BCA action grants, things like that. Or if this was a program that generated revenue through parking fees, we could decide what to do with those revenues, potentially use that to pay for these fully public parklets.
Yep, lots of opportunities.
Lots of opportunities.
Thanks, just
Yeah.
wanted to point it out as something to think about, so, good.
Thank you, Commissioner Burr. Commissioner O'Neill.
Okay. Yes, this is really exciting. So one question, I'll get a couple. What about, did you have any questions about businesses wanting to partner? I'm just using an example, and I don't think it would be a good fit, but just say El Cortijo and Phoenix Books, or, two neighboring businesses. Would that be something that this kind of project could explore?
Yeah.
And then looking at, kind of what that business hours and public time would.
Yeah, it wasn't one of the exact follow-up questions we had in any of our surveys, but when we issued the RFP originally, it was open to an individual business, a group of businesses, a neighborhood group. It really was pretty open-ended for the pilot. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But I think that's something we would definitely be interested in seeing and be excited about, so.
We had a selection committee, and we scored all the proposals on various elements, and we said that we would give a higher rating to joint parklets when we see businesses working together to create a, joint parklet with other businesses. So that was in the scoring. We did factor that into the scoring.
Okay. And then in just kind of thinking about the 10 spots in the downtown area, I think I agree with Commissioner Gilman. I think it's a good number. Start with that, right? But what's this kind of strategic mapping? Are you thinking about strategic placement of it so that, as Commissioner Overby said, you look down the street and, it's vibrant over here and it's vibrant over there to draw you down to both sides, instead of having it, kind of clustered right around, I don't know, Church Street or wherever, but to really kind of expand the vibrancy of the city.
Yeah. I think that would come in with the evaluation, at the evaluation phase as well, when we're looking at which applications we receive. I think that would be more outreach on, it would mean more outreach on our part, probably ahead of time, to make sure we're reaching all of those different areas. And, at the end of the day, it's up to people to apply.
Yeah.
But we would be carefully considering, spacing and ideally we would have them spaced well throughout the city, but I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Will.
Yeah, that's a great point. We were more looking at it for the pilot as like what space doesn't make sense if it's near a, intersection where someone would be turning. We just wanted to make sure that they were in safe locations, but we would want to do a good job to do outreach in areas where they make the most sense to get that good mix.
just two other things. Kind of drawing on what Commissioner Barr said is, if this is going to be open to kind of residents as far as, like we're doing a neighborhood type of project, kind of how to streamline it so that the process is accessible for a group of neighbors to do without such a heavy lift. Kind of make it a success. And then I think, just in speaking to businesses about, this was one of my questions when you guys first came to propose the pilot, is really highlighting the economic benefit to businesses. I mean, you mentioned, here's like those two little bullet points about El Cortijo had a 2 to 3% increase in their sales, and whoever else had to hire extra staff.
Yeah.
That's really important to businesses. And as you move forward with this and go ahead and propose this to move forward, I really think communicating that to the downtown businesses might make them recognize that there really is the value added to this. Great job.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Just a few thoughts on my part. I remember going into this project here and approving the pilot, we were very concerned about maintaining the perception of a public access to these here. And so I'm admittedly disappointed that that perception was not reinforced more strongly through this. In fact, the perception was just the opposite, that these were dedicated spaces for private businesses. And I don't know that it could have been anticipated because of locked up seats, maybe, maybe not, but a good learning experience nonetheless. And one that I see vitally important for moving forward on this is preserving that. And it actually ties into the perception of let's face it, it's on a road, which is our public asset. You have two ends of that spectrum, and we see that debate kicking out every day, especially in the last meeting, right, where I deserve this road to either park my car or travel my car on, or on the other end, it's I deserve to ride my bike in a dedicated bike lane and not have to navigate around cars. Or, being a public asset, it should not subsidize private businesses who ought to be able to hold their own, right? So with the variety of perceptions, that's especially why I say that public component is so vital to making this successful. And in that sense, I don't see this as having necessarily been a successful pilot. I'm really glad for those businesses because they are a member of our public as well, and they deserve to benefit. But we talked about giving access going forward and maybe putting dedicated seating, but I don't see that working unless chairs can be cleared out and space given so that people can actually see that dedicated seating. So it's little details like that that become really important to me as this were to move forward. So a stronger emphasis on public access to these parklets, I think, is essential for me to be able to move forward with this if this is coming back next month. The other piece here, kind of playing into that same thing, would be parking and trying to rectify things, right? Because we hear, you hear the Burlington rumor all the time, right? There's no parking downtown, right? And people just kind of troll around, probably because most people want a space 50 feet in front of the business that they're going to go to, and it's just not the reality of downtowns in any city. Nonetheless, I wanted to check in with you too. Is it true that there's not enough parking downtown, or is our perception that there really is enough parking for businesses? And I'm speaking generally. It's going to tie into the street seats in a minute. But I don't know, Director Spencer or what's your perception on downtown parking?
So we do parking counts. There are certainly areas of downtown where parking is over that 85% threshold at certain times of day and certain days of the week. And to your point, I think you eloquently put it that people who want to find a space immediately adjacent to where they're trying to go may not always find that. That said, as we talked earlier tonight, there's always 100+ spaces available at Lakeview and College Garage. A lot of the opportunity is to better direct people to the spaces that do exist downtown. And we know we continue to need to do a better job of helping people find the available spaces that are there when they come downtown.
Yeah. And so in that sense, to me, it ties into the street seats in the sense of wayfinding to help people find those parking spaces. This probably gets even broader than street seats in the sense of, helping people who are just circling. How do we find those parking spaces? Or more importantly, what is the expectation that we expect people to reasonably walk from where they park to where they need to go? Is it a block? Is it 2 blocks? And I don't know that we necessarily need to answer that. It's kind of rhetorical because every user experience is going to be unique to each individual. You know, if I'm elderly, I certainly want to be closer than if I'm young and can walk quite a distance. So that does depend, but it also does define how we manage these street seats as well, using a parking space that someone could otherwise park in who wants to frequent the businesses in that area. So I'll just summarize what I'm getting. I think wayfinding is important, and then public access or reinforcing a public notion to these things, to me, are 2 keys to moving forward. So those are my thoughts. Thank you. I see no members of the public. We scared everyone away, so there is no public portion. There's no vote for this either. Any remaining commissioner questions or thoughts on this matter? Okay, sounds like next month we're coming back to this, yeah?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
The plan is to preview our program guide next month.
And will we be voting at that time, or?
I don't believe that is the plan.
Okay.
I don't believe there would be anything for you to vote on, but that might still be in development.
Sure. Okay, fair enough. Great. Look forward to
Depends
hearing more.
in a way of what the fee structure is and whether it requires commission action.
Sure.
Like you had
Okay.
to act this year on the parking meter fees and removing the parking meters for the season. We'll see what the proposed fee structure is. If it requires commission action, we will seek that action.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation. Great. That closes item 6. We are on to item number 7, narrow streets policy.
This one was listed as an action item, and I understand from Associate Engineer Philip Peterson that no action is needed here. It is a briefing in anticipation of having a public community meeting on the 30th, and then coming back next month with any recommendation.
Okay. Are we looking at this now then, or are we looking at this another time?
Plan was to go through a quick presentation to brief you as to what we are having a public meeting on and getting your input on a slightly tweaked internal policy on narrow streets so that we can reflect accurately to the public on the meeting on the 30th how we are evaluating whether there needs to be a seasonal parking removal on 2 streets in question.
Got it. Thank you.
Right, so this is more of a briefing on the policies and procedures that we've already established and get some input from all of you. So, oh, where's the clicker? Yeah. Do you have the clicker?
Is it in your computer?
It is. I moved it.
Here, I will advance for you.
Yeah, great, thanks. Perfect. So about 2 years ago, staff worked with the commission and the commission chair to decide what is the best course of action with narrow streets. So we worked with the commission on developing a comprehensive plan on narrow streets policy. We brought it to this commission in January of 2018. Got some input from you, and then in March it was approved and signed. It is an internal SOP. It's not a policy that needs to be approved by the commission, but we do appreciate your feedback. We do need your feedback so that we're doing things correctly. So based on the feedback, we created this policy in collaboration with the fire departments and with streets maintenance team. We implemented it, and in fall of last year, we implemented some parking restrictions on 3 streets, on Germain, Latham, and Hoover. Those are seasonal parking restrictions, and we've also been collecting data continuously in all seasons to get an idea on what's going on. So a little background, just to kind of get us back up to speed on what a narrow street is A narrow street is a street that is 28 feet wide or less. There are other components that can come along with that, but essentially that's what a narrow street is. We have 116 narrow streets in the city of Burlington. 97 of those streets have existing parking restrictions. This is after the implementation in fall of last year. It used to be less. We used to have 22 narrow streets that had less than 14 feet of effective travel width. Now we only have 19 narrow streets that have less than 14 feet of effective travel width with no existing restrictions. And that was after several discussions with the fire department and with streets maintenance. So the 14-foot number is based on information from the fire department. You all have read the memos. I'm happy to send those to you again. And so that's the number that we've settled on, is 14 feet. So this is what we're here to discuss tonight. There are 3 new additional considerations that we are recommending adding to the policies and procedures around narrow streets. And this is based around DPW staff, Burlington Fire Department, and street maintenance. It's based around everyone's input from the past year. And so these are those additional considerations just to augment the established guidelines and standards. And chances are we'll probably do this again in another year. So to break them down, number 1, representatives of DPW's Traffic Division and Engineering Division shall review any and all projects for narrow streets. That technical services, that'd be Norm, myself, other engineers, any project, whether it's traffic calming, stormwater, any projects involving narrow streets, we want an opportunity to be able to review those plans to make sure that we're not creating another condition that is undesirable. The second consideration is if snow removal and storage is something that we can utilize on a narrow street. So, that's an additional consideration. If parking restrictions aren't going to do it during winter months, perhaps we can do some snow removal and storage, just to something else to look at. And then the last is geometric and topographic issues should be in consideration. So each narrow street is 28 feet wide or less, but some narrow streets may have a hill or a sharp curve, which is geometric and topographic considerations. So we wanted to make sure that, yeah, I understand this and other engineers do, but we want to codify this so that if other folks need to do this work, they have something to look at. So a little bit more background on our approach. We've been taking a measured approach. This is a sensitive issue. It's a delicate issue on many streets, and we understand that. Our community has a long history of living and working with these narrow streets, so we acknowledge that. But we do need to kind of balance the community needs with the needs of the fire department to do their jobs and our street maintenance crews to do their jobs as well. And we started narrow streets parking restrictions last year on streets that we considered the most constraining, and those were streets that had less than 10 feet of effective travel width. That was why Germain and Latham were picked last year. Hoover was added to the recommendation because it was a resident request, if you remember. DPW staff are now looking at a list of streets that are in the 10-foot effective travel width. And yes, we are looking at 2 particular streets. Russell and Charles are the 2 streets in this category which are the most constraining for emergency responders and maintenance teams. This is most likely due to the geometry of the 2 streets. As you know, Russell and Charles meets at an intersection, and this has created a bottleneck for BFD and streets maintenance teams, and we've talked about that before as well. So a bit of a timeline. Over the past year, we've done several updates to the TOOC. We'll be doing another update to the TOOC tomorrow night. We've done several updates with the commission. We did have a neighborhood meeting for the Russell and Charles neighborhood in May. And then we've also done several data collection efforts. We're doing an update tonight. We will be having a neighborhood meeting for the Russell and Charles Street neighborhood next Wednesday, so in 1 week. And we may have recommendations come November for those two streets or others. But we'll see. And I think that's about it. So questions or discussion points?
Thank you very much.
Happy to talk about it.
Flip it around a little bit here. Commissioner Hogan, we'll start with you this time.
Nothing at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, sure thing. Commissioner Barr?
I think it makes sense. We're looking at them holistically and strategically, so
Right.
I like the approach.
Excellent, thank you. Commissioner O'Neill?
Ditto. I like the approach. And then, so the goal is to come back at some point once you have that meeting next Wednesday with Charles and Russell Street residents.
Right, we need to meet with the neighborhood. I mean, we're sensitive to people's needs. I mean, it's a delicate balance, and some neighborhoods, it's a little bit easier to do this. Hoover Street was a much easier street to do this. They wanted it, they asked for it. But, you know, we're sensitive to these people's needs.
And they had off-street parking resources where
Exactly.
Russell and
Right.
Charles have more limited off-street parking resources. We expect it to be a more challenging conversation.
We got to think outside of the box maybe a little bit and see what we can do.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Overby?
I think it's great that you're adding those criteria. And one thing I was going to suggest that in the draft you have defined what a narrow street is.
Sure.
But then you, at the last sentence of the first paragraph of purpose, you say, you know, it also works in parallel with the city's use of yield streets, and you might want to just add the definition of a yield street is defined as, just for the sake of helping people know the difference between narrow street policy and yield street, because I keep having my own challenges of that.
Right.
And there seems to be a redundant sentence in the third paragraph down. That sentence that starts street width affects the capability of emergency service vehicles. That's sort of maybe doesn't need to be that one sentence there because you've got it in the paragraph before that.
Sure.
I don't know. It's just and one other. I mean, editorial thing at the under the guidance paragraph. The last sentence sort of says every potential creation of a narrow street must be evaluated. I don't know, that doesn't seem, I was thinking something like treatment of a narrow street must be evaluated based on existing, I don't know, I was just trying to, you're not really creating a narrow street, you're trying to figure out how to address the narrow street. Or maybe I'm not getting what you were saying, maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but I was having trouble with that sentence, so. But I think those are added criteria are great, and I like that we're going in this direction so that the discussion is happening and it's not, you know, nobody can feel like they're being picked on because it really is a safety issue and a maintenance issue and like you said, yeah, so I think it's great with those comments that might help.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Overby. Commissioner Gilman?
Nothing else from me.
Thank you. Just briefly for me too, you know, echoing a lot of the comments that have been made, there seem to be good changes and allow you some flexibility to deal with each street as it is unique, especially as you mentioned, Charles and Russell, I think, are unique too and will pose some challenges to really talk through because there are severe consequences, I think, to just kind of applying a blanket policy, maybe like might have been okay for Germain, where they had a little bit of overflow parking, but yeah, tough for Charles and Russell. Question is, it's kind of in general here, like you figure to date, we've always had the street and the parking has been like it has been for as long as we can remember. So why now does this come up? Why now is this an issue? Or has it been an issue the whole time? We just
I think
haven't
it's
known
always
about
been
it.
an issue.
Is that true?
In talking to the city engineer, Norm Baldwin, about it today, it's, you know, we have a responsibility to address it and to make the best choice for each neighborhood. And, yeah, I mean, as I talk about in the presentation, we've been living and working in these narrow streets for several years, decades. But we also know what the fire department tells us and what our street maintenance crew tells us and the data that we've collected. And I mean, we have to be brave and make some hard decisions, maybe. Or we have to have some unique solutions.
If I may, I would say that it's a confluence of interests among the stakeholders that Philip discussed who have identified this as a public safety concern. And I can't speak for past administrations, but upon hearing the comments from the fire department, from the city engineer, from the street maintenance team, I did not feel like we could let this lie without a deliberative process. I made the decision not to try to change all 22 streets at once because I felt like that would be a difficult lift for Burlington. But I could not let this one lie, and have appreciated staff's willingness to try to have very difficult conversations with the community. As we know, Germain Street was a difficult multi-year conversation. I'm expecting that Germain and Russell will be similar in its challenges, and we will go in with an open mind and see if there are solutions that try to work with the unique characteristics of that neighborhood.
And so does that mean, excuse me, that we've just basically been lucky to date to
I think so.
say not have a fire on the street?
Absolutely.
Or yeah,
I think we've been lucky.
or have there been incidents that we know of that have?
But that's the other thing too. So if you remember on Germain Street a couple of years ago, the ambulance situation, the lady had to be, they had to, I mean, yeah, they had to, I forget the
Right,
whole
wheel her down the
situation.
street in order to get to the ambulance,
Streets,
right?
and, I mean, God forbid someone has a heart attack or, I mean, obviously, rarely are our worst fears or our best hopes realized, for sure. But
that's a great quote.
It's true though.
Yeah.
So we're not planning on having a massive fire happen.
Sure.
What we have is data, and we have a policy that's personality free. It's based on principle, and it's based on collaboration with firefighters and with our street maintenance crew, and they've been patient, and they're just like, come on guys, you know, let's get this done so that we can do our jobs and protect the public, because it is all about public safety, and I understand how we understand how sensitive this is and delicate it is. So we're going to tread lightly. We're going to have this meeting with this neighborhood next week, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, okay. Well, I hope to be able to attend as well. Please.
So just let me ask a clarifying question then. So, in, kind of professional other capacities, if you know something's a danger or a risk, then is the city more liable if they're not responding to that? And so it sounds like you are, but just in that communication to the neighborhoods and underscoring that this isn't this capriciousness, but that in fact, you have your data, but you really are being responsible and responding to, a potential hazard.
You're right, and at the same time, it's been an existing condition that people have come to count on. And they have made decisions in where they live or how they manage their families and whether they have guests stay over, and people come to understand their current access to parking resources as a static situation.
And conditions have changed with folks having apartments. I mean, so there have been an additional strain on our resources that we have to acknowledge that has also added more cars to the street. Talking about yield streets, not to get way off topic here, but if you don't have a lot of cars on a street that is a narrow street, having cars there can behave as a traffic calming effect. That was the purpose of a yield street. And so if there weren't a lot of cars parked on Russell and Charles, we would say, well, there's space, and it's nice that those cars are there because it's keeping people slow, which is a good thing. But in this situation, we're kind of over a certain threshold, and anyways.
Makes access difficult.
It makes access difficult.
So.
Good luck next week. I have
Thanks.
a meeting, otherwise I would, be interested to go.
By meeting.
Right.
Okay.
But thanks for your work on this. It's good, and I think you have a sound defense, just as we went through the Germain Street exercise. You really, really sympathize with people on both sides, and in the end, public safety sort of trumps all. So,
I'll say this.
Well, yeah.
What happened last year was a product of us working with you and we could not have accomplished this without commission support.
Well, we're thankful. I remember really having a tough time sleeping,
tough
getting
one.
calls from some residents who required that ambulance to come down that street and that knowing it couldn't fit. And I just, you could only cross your fingers for so long before they begin to hurt. Okay. That's all my questions. Any other commissioner questions? And I believe there's no action at this time, you mentioned, so we're passing that. There's no members of the public here, so we'll pretty safely skip that section. Looks like we're all set. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
That closes item 7, narrow streets. We're on to item 8, the home stretch. Format for meeting minutes. And this is Director Spencer.
Thank you very much. All right, so I'm just going to pass around a memo from me, if I may, and I'll touch on it very quickly. All right. So at last couple of meetings, we've talked about meeting minute format, and we want to get something that is clear for staff in developing the minutes and meets the needs of the commission. So what we've done is reached out to the city attorney and conferred with them on how we should approach minutes. The first bullets at the top talk about what the Vermont law, open meeting law requires in terms of minute taking, all things that are fairly straightforward and that we're currently doing. Those are kind of the minimum requirements. What we've tried to do in the following 3 bullets are talk about how we're seeking to capture the essence of a conversation with a limited couple of sentences to provide some flavor but not provide a transcript. And so this is how I am proposing that staff be directed to take minutes. Clearly, the commission can always add further comment or embellishment as commissioners feel needed to do so. But I just wanted you to see this and see if you had any additional direction for us to make sure this can be a smooth and efficient and dependable process.
Dive in on this one just real quick. I remember we had a conversation only a couple months ago, I think, maybe 3. Everything feels like a couple months ago. And we talked about trying to refer, I remember my issue being referring people to the video and claiming that it was not such a transparent move. And there was a valid argument against that, saying it's hard to encapsulate the true sense or meaning of what people are intending and all that. And it was only after the meeting I thought, well, what do we do if there's no video? How do we keep those minutes? And that almost struck me as that ought to be our standard, right? Pretending there's no video and keeping minutes along those lines. Of course, acknowledging that it should not be a transcript. So I think I need to read through this, but is there any, I don't know, what are your thoughts as that comes into play?
The bullets at the bottom, and I appreciate this, sorry to deliver it today. The bullets at the bottom really talk about if there is video or audio, and if there is not, if we know that CCTV cannot attend, that we do a more thorough job to provide context. That's the last bullet. If the meeting's not recorded, then we should capture more of the statements by the people in the room. So it's not creating, a transcript, but a more detailed summary then would be crafted.
Sure. Okay, and then to piggyback on that one, and I swear I'll go to the fellow commissioners here, like coming up on the next agenda item is to approve our minutes from last month, right? And on there, it mentions, Commissioner Barr made a motion to accept staff's proposal, and then it just kind of goes on to say who voted on it. So if we say do we agree that we need the language of what is being passed in the minutes, or is there maybe a city attorney's opinion on that for clarity, or is just referring to it generally enough?
I think to your point, we should be specific in listing what the motion is that the commission is approving. And so when in this top section, Vermont law requires, and it says a record of any motion, proposal, or resolution made, I read that to be that the motion of staff's recommendation, if that's what your motion is, should be repeated in the minutes so that it is accessible.
Yeah.
So, always learning, and that's kind of what I wanted to do, to capture this and give this to staff so that they have a clear guideline
This is great.
for how to take them.
Sure. Okay. Go around the table. Commissioner Gilman, thoughts on minutes? We have to defer to our clerk here first.
No, I mean, I think, in the last meeting, I think I was the one that you were commenting on, stating that, trying to capture everyone's intent of their comments is nearly impossible.
Yeah.
My opinion. And, I think where we struggle is when we try and operate in some limbo in between the two, where we're capturing some comments that maybe don't reflect. So trying to capture some comments tends to be then where we then spend 3 months trying to straighten them out and get them to reflect adequately the comments, versus just saying, so I don't know, I just feel like we've gone around. I feel like this was a topic in my first year on commission around the minutes and trying to change minutes. And every time we try and add flavor to the minutes, we struggle. That just seems to, so I think this makes sense to me. So.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you. Commissioner Overby?
I think that your comment about including the wording of the motion, not just the title,
Right.
Ethan Allen Parkway Regulations, just for example of the one we're coming up with. I see minutes as the way that a person who did not attend the meeting would get a sense of what took place, and the positions of the public body representatives, and if so, that to me is what it is, and that's really pretty much what this says. It's a record of the motion, so that would be the wording of it. It would be the disposition, what happened, and I think sometimes it's confusing when there's a motion for an amendment or something. But I think this does summarize it, and I know one of the comments here about if it's recorded, well, you should just assume that people will watch the recording to get it. I don't really agree with that, and I think if you go to the point of what you're saying, what was the topic of the agenda item, what was the outcome, and who voted for what. But I know we discussed this in the past, and where there was a case where the one of the representatives had a specific reason for voting a certain way, we had, I thought, agreed that we would be the one that would be responsible for ensuring that information was represented in the minutes. It's very difficult for the person who's taking minutes to get all that. So I felt like that was how we had resolved it. If there was a point where it wasn't just a matter of, this is the motion, this is the vote, these are the ayes, these are the nays. That's probably not completely enough, in my opinion, but it may be for most of the time that we vote on things. It may not always be, but it isn't. It's your responsibility if you felt like it's not adequately representing why you voted yes on something or voted no. That, to me, it feels like it should be an option to put in that.
And what we talked about the last time we talked about this was, if more than just that you voted aye or nay was what you want recorded, and then we never do this, but was to make, and I don't mean me or anyone else, I just mean as a general body, we've never actually been good at this, is to say, I would like it recorded that whatever.
No, because X, Y, or Z.
And I guess that's, if we want something different than this recommends recorded, should we have a provision that if a commissioner wants an explicit thing recorded, that they request that to be explicitly.
Do we need to add that in there? I mean, I don't know that we need to add that.
We never do it.
I do it all the time, but I usually, and I've done it, for this meeting.
Sorry, I mean, as a live statement, we would never say, and I
Well,
want that recorded.
but the point is, you don't know at that point.
Right.
That it won't already be in the minutes. So you will not know. That's why, in my opinion, you won't know.
Sorry, I think
make
if we follow this guidelines, we won't be documenting those things, correct?
if we follow the guidelines, our attempt will be to provide a short summary. We're not going to say Solveig said X, but we're going to say the commission and public discussed the implications of this on people living in this neighborhood. And then at least you'll get a sense, okay, there was a discussion about the impacts.
But without the comments that, Commissioner Overby stated such
Right.
and such, that would not necessarily be explicit.
Correct, but then if Commissioner Overby, in reviewing the draft minutes, felt like they wanted, or she wanted, something explicit, as Commissioner Overby often does, say, I would like to make amendments to the minutes, then we all can consider those before approving them.
I think that's probably the best way to do it, because you don't really know that the minutes aren't going to be perfect the way they're written, because you just don't know. Sometimes there's hearing issues and, But I really feel like I have many times looked back at minutes from meetings that I did not get to attend, and if they're skeletal, then you get nothing. It's really hard to know, and some people are not going to be able to watch the recording. I think we're in a funny era here that we can't assume the electronic thing is always, going to be available to everybody, and you just need to be able to figure it out. The paper one should. This is good for what we really the basics are. I think this is excellent, and I just feel like I think we still would be making that amendment proposal, and then we all have to agree that that was what was actually took place. I can't. You can't have somebody go, well, I said this, and they didn't, I mean, we'd all have to go, wait a minute, you didn't say that. I mean, that's the way it works. You know what I mean? So I feel like that's the way, this works for me. I don't feel like it's saying you can't make an amendment to the minutes for something that you said that you want in the minutes.
Record, yeah.
Does that seem the way you're reading this?
I read this as we would be getting a more simplified version of the minutes than the limbo we've been in maybe for the last 12 months, and that therefore, if there will be less correcting of the statements made in the minutes because they were trying to capture context to some degree, but not fully.
More than?
Is the intent of this to streamline them or to?
I think there's a way that we can summarize a conversation, the issues that were discussed without attributing it to he said, she said, but these topics were discussed in this agenda item. And then if a commission member wants to add. So I do think that it is providing some level of synthesis of what was discussed. If we don't hit it right, you all can help edit it, but it certainly is not intended to be a 6-page thick, single-spaced account of the meeting.
Okay. I'll skip around the table here, if that's all right.
Obviously, yeah, if we try, we can approve this, and then if we try it and we find that they're not of value, then we revisit it.
Yeah, technically no vote requested on this, yes?
No
It's just
vote.
more of an informal, we'll follow it and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to get your general feedback. I'll operate on this plus your comments. I like the comments that you talked about in terms of if at a meeting you explicitly say you want something on the record, then we'll capture that and then follow up. Obviously, any edits to us in the clerk in advance are helpful.
We'll revisit this in 2 months. Commissioner Hogan.
Yeah, I think this is a good starting point. It's
Great.
valuable to get something on paper to aim for. Something that was running through my head was whether it makes sense to just have a template. Sometimes in like a web form or something, a way to minimize the errors and improve the quality of what's collected is to have like input check boxes or something, or you could have like sort of a pre-populated thing. Like now I'm adding
A large fry to my
an
meal.
item to my minute,
Yeah.
and you check yay no boxes right there to sort of reduce if there's ambiguity. I don't know if there's a time savings to be had there. Anyways, yeah, no, I like the starting point.
Thank you. Commissioner Barr?
Sure. I like this as well. I'm curious, though, and I just happened to open up to look back as far back as I could, and I can go a little bit further, but I do notice that sometimes when you look at the meeting minutes, it is a little bit skeletal, so you're not quite certain what might have been discussed. So in reference to the videos or the audios from the documentation, how long are those available? I mean, are they forever? If I wanted to look at something in 2012,
Right.
can I do that?
My understanding is CCTV does go way back, and I see a nod here. We can confirm with them that, that there is not a 2-year sunset, but that, documents are retrievable, or meeting minutes or
The only reason I
videos are
ask is
retrievable.
sometimes when things come up, we're trying to remember, what did we say? How did that go? And we do the best we can to recollect. I'm curious too, and I know that there might be two separate entities, but in looking at these minutes, is there a way to maybe link the video to the minutes so that if I went to one place to the minutes, I could hit that link and it's hyperlinked so that it brings me to the tape? Because that way it streamlines. And I know Solveig and I both love to just go back and look through all this stuff all the time. So it might be something that when we're trying to look something up, that's just takes a step out of it, makes it easier.
Well, case in point was, I remember when Narrow Streets was coming up, researching it, because we first visited in 2015, if you can believe it.
A while ago. I remember that.
It was a while ago, and I remember it because I was not around for that meeting. So ironically, I looked back through the minutes, right, because I wanted to see how did that go down, and couldn't really determine exactly because of the structure. And plus, I wanted to see the video anyway, so it did require a little scraping around on Channel 17's website, but ended up finding it and watching that section of the video. So, but yeah, it's a great point. If we were to insert a link, especially to the DPW homepage there for past minutes, how helpful that would be.
And that way it would streamline what we now term the skeletal approach, the outline, but then you have the recording right there so that it really would be right there. So it almost wouldn't have to say, I'd like for the record to say this, because you get the record right there.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Well, and I was going to add that I know that the camera person, he's actually marking the time point where each of our items are changing. So you can actually go, and I want to look up Section 5. But I want to say that one of the meetings that I was not able to attend, there was no video, and I had to try to look at the minutes, and I had no idea what happened. So this is public business. We are representatives of the public interest, and we really I feel like keeping a good public record of what's going on is really important. Even it could be 10 years later, somebody's going to be trying to figure out what happened, and I want that record to be good. And so, to me, depending on the video one is, okay, but we did discuss this, putting the link in there, years ago, and we were going to do it. And it fell by the wayside. So this is great, you're doing that suggestion again.
We're going to do it again.
It was suggested before, but we forgot about it, I think, at some point.
And I'm not suggesting that we make it skeletal because we have
No,
that.
but I like it being.
Because it also says right here that if there is no video, then there's a lot more effort put into the minutes. So the fact that there was no recording for that or audio, if we had been following this, there should have been a much more robust.
In that case, there was like a error or something, anyway.
I don't know what happened, but it was just a coincidence.
Maybe that was a month we skipped?
Oh, right. It ran out of tape or something like that, yeah.
I think, I don't know.
Somebody didn't know to take the better minutes at that point.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's right. Forgot about that. Well, plus, when Commissioner Barr runs for president one day, we want some video to be able to look back on and,
this or somewhere else.
see all your public comments. Maybe we should move on, Commissioner Barr.
I haven't announced my candidacy yet. Go for it.
I guess I had one question. What has been the communication with staff and our awesome note-taker over there? What's the feedback on what we can do to help facilitate better minute-taking? I know some of us ramble sometimes, I know. But is there anything that we can do to help the process in taking minutes, or at least communicating clearly, not just make this for the record?
Holly, you want to provide input?
She's so smart.
You can. But if there is any way that we can be a little more helpful in this process, I hope that there are channels
to communicate that to us. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further comments on minutes from anyone? There's no action requested, and again, no public here, so we can drift away from this. Commissioner, yeah, great. Director Spencer, are you good with moving on in this, or any other thoughts?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for the background material here and getting that done. It's very helpful. And as you can see, it's a recurring theme. Closing out item 8, item number 9. Segue to approval of draft minutes. I want to say before any motion gets landed on the table here, I know Commissioner Overby had sent through email some modifications to the minutes previously. I have modifications myself, and I'm thinking it might be a time saver if we not move on these minutes this month, maybe next month, and that maybe as we as commissioners should email. Who should we email if we want to make changes?
I would suggest let's email the clerk, and can we also email Val Ducharme? And I think we can take the lead on it, but it'd be helpful for the clerk to see what edits are being proposed.
Yeah.
Does that work for the commission?
I didn't email it to everybody. I just emailed mine to.
Oh, I apologize
Val
then. My bad.
and to
Okay.
you. Yeah, well, I printed them out, so I don't know if you want to hand them out. We'll talk about them next week.
What I think what we can do is, well, we have them through email, right? So
I didn't send them to anybody but
okay,
to
just
you
those.
and to Val, because I wanted to, I know I was gonna bring them on paper, and she uses them electronically, so.
Yeah,
But
sure.
now if we're gonna I don't know whether to save these for next week. or-
Well,
I know.
if we go with
Want
this
'em in-
format, because I have modifications as well, then we would not vote on the minutes this month,
We're
but
not
we would
gonna
vote on
vote.
them next month.
Right.
So I would say maybe we have whomever is going to mock these up will reflect changes. And then
Before we
when
get
come
them?
back next month, we'll just have a version that
so
should
we
be a
don't wanna
draft
use-
of that point. Yeah.
Okay, so we don't want these.
I would hold off on that for now, if that's okay. If you're
I just was
comfortable.
gonna give give people time, and then
For
you.
clarification, you said to the clerk, is that you? Okay. I never see the front. I never see the front. I never see the front. I'm always behind.
Look at his name tag.
Good check.
I was just checking.
I'm just-
I was gonna send them to you, but then I think I just said a couple things, other CC to Tiki, so they ended up not going to you. They went to Val and to Tiki.
Get him.
Yep.
And sorry, I didn't mean to reveal you for modifications. I
No, it doesn't matter.
I have them too, so I don't want to say both. I figured we could just save some time.
That's-
We each
that's-
have modifications, and does anyone else think they might have modifications? I don't need to know what they are, it's just more of a heads up if you do or not. Okay. All right, so it might be just,
So ultimately, they'll be emailed to everybody before the meeting? Is
yeah,
that
so
what we'll do?
then
Okay.
next month we would get these
Well,
minutes.
they would be the draft that would appear in the.
Right.
Okay, so
the
they'll be
packet.
incorporated in the minute.
That's right, because then
Okay.
our action will be to approve
Our-
this
our-
month's minutes plus,
Our aspiration
you-
in the past with this would be, well, what we tried at one point was sending out the minutes earlier if we want to try and approve minutes at the next meeting, we should try and send out draft minutes
Yep.
in advance of the meeting for comments to be adopted prior to the meeting.
In advance of the packets being sent out.
Right.
That was an effort we undertook at one point.
Yep, and we do post 5 days after the meeting, so they are available. They're not proactively sent to commissioners. We could certainly do that. They are available.
Let's try that, maybe
Okay.
just push them out to us so that
Okay.
if people want to try and send in edits, that gives us a chance to have good minutes by the time we try and
Would we,
approve them.
but then we send them to everybody on the commission to,
Or just a link to them in an email.
well, what I'm just trying to think of is they have to be discussed, and you want like a track changes, like add this, change that, so it's a
I
different.
think the concern is if we're like
Right.
circulating comments, does that become a public meeting?
That's why I didn't think we would do that. I would think you have to do it.
So that's why I think
Right.
he's suggesting, if you have updates, send them to me and Val.
Yeah,
Okay,
Based on that draft, we will try and incorporate
yeah.
a
Okay.
finalized version for the meeting, and if there's further discussion, then we can do that in public at the next meeting.
okay, so that
But it's
they won't show as, they'll just be a new version.
Yeah.
It's an attempt to
an
get a
edit.
better, it's an attempt to have a better version to hopefully adopt at the next
Right.
meeting, rather than,
That works, let's try that.
rather than something that is basically the draft being looked at the next
Right.
meeting, and then always ending up 2
So we
months
won't
later.
be showing what was original and
No.
what was the edit changes. It'll just be
Right.
the one draft. There will never
Right.
be multiples.
Right.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, the draft gets, as you said, gets posted, but
Right.
then, once it's finally adopted, it is replaced with the final minutes, so.
Yeah. That
Correct.
works.
Makes sense. I see what you're at.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so we're comfortable
And
moving
you guys
on
will
to.
add the aspect of sending them out to us, just.
Yes, I'm writing
we're
that
not-
down here. I'm going to add that to the minute taking here so that we
Cool.
have it baked into the policy.
I look forward to seeing the minutes in the minutes. Kind of a surreal experience. We don't have enough to do. All right. So you and I will email our comments as directed here to.
Right, right.
Yep, to Chris and to Val. And we
Val,
could probably
yeah.
CC Chapin, I imagine, in that as well, might be wise. So that'll be our action. And it's same with anyone else, same action. Okay, great. So we'll take up the minutes next month. We will have 2 rounds of minutes to vote on at that point. Great. Thank you, everyone, for that accommodation. Number 10, Director's Report, sir.
Great. Let's make this quick. All right. So in your packet, I want to draw people's attention to a very important upcoming water rate study open house. This is coming up next Tuesday, the 29th of October, 6 to 8 p.m. in Contois Auditorium. The City Council, when they approved our water rates for FY20, in the resolution required us to undergo a rate study to look at how best to structure our rates, in part to be sensitive to low volume and low income customers. And so we have a consulting team on board helping staff to look at ways of structuring our rates and whether we have affordability programs and what services we charge for and how we charge for them. So this initial open house is an opportunity for folks to learn more about our water resources program and our current rate structure, and to get some initial feedback on proposals for how we change our rate structure. The council has asked us to bring proposals to them for them to act on in advance of the FY21 budget process. So we are seeking to bring proposals by late winter, early spring for you all to give us input on, and for the public and the council to give us input, with the hope that the council gives us direction in March or April, so that we can then look at the FY21 budget in the context of a new rate structure. So this is an important piece. It's a topic that may not be super exciting to the general public, but it underlies how we deliver our services and charge people equitably or fairly for those services. So really hoping that people can take the opportunity to attend this, and there will be more information, and there's a website moving forward. Winooski Avenue Transportation Study, we had a great meeting last night. We will be having an upcoming additional public meeting to talk through our recommendations. And we are proposing a suite of fairly significant short-term recommendations for the Winooski Avenue corridor, and want to engage the public in the conversation of those recommendations. We talked about narrow streets tonight. We did include a blurb on the Manhattan and Park and Manhattan and North Champlain intersections in my director's report. We have been engaging the neighborhood and will plan to have a neighborhood meeting with them. We're thinking of joining their walking school bus one morning so that we can see firsthand with them their concerns, and we'll keep you all posted. St. Paul Street, Great Streets project, we are just thrilled to have the project open. And last night during the rainstorm, I took the opportunity to come down at 10 o'clock at night and see how the rain gardens are performing. And it really is a great new standard for how we are managing stormwater in the public right-of-way. And I encourage you all at the next rainstorm to go walk up and down the corridor. It is a significant commitment to Lake Champlain. And the more we can do this across our city, the better off the lake will be, and it delivers great benefits to our public realm. More trees, more plants, a more inviting streetscape. I think I'll leave it at that. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from commissioners on the director's report? Okay, seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry. We have Commissioner Orby.
I just had a question about the whole 127 Park Street, intersection thing. Is 127 a state-managed roadway? I mean, what are we able to do with, like, backing off the 50 mile an hour? It says 25, but is there some way that we're allowed to do on that stretch for people coming in off the 127? Because what's part of the problem is that there's a curve, and so people are coming around a curve to come up to that stoplight. It's very dangerous. I go through there, and so I totally agree with everybody, but I was just wondering, what authority do we have as a city on that stretch to do anything to, like, narrow it down and put flower pots or whatever, like half a mile back on that? Do we have that authority, or is that state?
So we do have a finance and maintenance agreement with the state when it was originally constructed, and we need to review the finance and maintenance agreement to see how broadly our powers go. We are generally responsible for maintenance of that corridor. We repaved it a couple of years ago. But in terms of significant design changes, I will research it with the engineering team and let you know. So I can't give you a definitive answer on that right now.
Well, I thought that was maybe part of the problem we're having, is that we don't have authority to do something there, and you'd have to work through the state to do something, and that would complicate the operation. But part of it is literally it's a blind curve, and then you're at the stoplight. So it's a setup for drivers. So that the 25 has to happen a quarter of a mile back.
Our team's heading out there tomorrow to do a site visit internally, and then we'll be setting up a meeting with the public soon after.
Great, thanks.
I will note, having lived next to that intersection, I've seen accidents, but there was also for a long time no crosswalk there, let alone one that had a little person, to give you the time to cross. So I can't speak to the time of that currently or anything, but I see that as an improvement at a minimum. So I know we're taking steps along that path.
I really appreciate you mentioning that. There have been a number of steps, from moving curb to pedestrian signals to changing lane assignments, putting up different signage coming southbound on 127. Clearly, we hear from the neighborhood that while those steps are appreciated, that there's still more work to be done.
Great. Any other commissioner thoughts on the director's report?
Can I just, one more thing about 127?
Absolutely.
I was going to bring it up in my commissioner comments, but Balin is here right now. So right now we seem like we're limited in what we may be able to do with 127. And I know you're going on a site visit and do the walking school bus, but is there a reconfiguration possible for Park Street? Because it's 2 lanes, so that certainly does not discourage anyone to slow down, because you can barrel down. Even though they have the speed humps, you can blow through there. So thinking about the possibility of dealing with what we can affect change on, and look at Park Street as an option.
Okay. Yep.
Can I
I'll add that to the
piggyback
mix.
on that? Because I've been thinking about that.
Did you say piggyback?
Piggyback. Did I say piggyback?
Ah,
Be Commissioner
that is
O'Neill.
brilliant.
I want a Commissioner O'Neill back on that one. I bike through there almost nightly now, because I've been biking quite a bit more. And one of the thoughts that I had, and I don't know how easy this might be, but so I think that's Park Street and Champlain Street are the 2 streets there.
Yes.
So Park Street is the 127 that goes south. Champlain goes north. How about if you flipped it so that it's coming north that way and south the other way? How much would that restrict flow of traffic, but that would certainly stop the blow through the intersection? Well, like anything, when you put in those kind of obstacles that you have to stop and you have to turn, and that's why I was such a proponent for Chase Street having a 90-degree turn to go into it as opposed to the bank turn that they do now. Once you take away the ease and convenience of speed, you've caused people to stop and make
Right.
a call and do something.
It's really clever.
So I just thought that might be an option.
Wow.
I will share all these with our team.
I'm sure they got a pretty good whiteboard going on this one.
I'm sure. It's probably a Sheldon Cooper kind of solve this equation.
All right. I'm looking around carefully to make sure I haven't forgotten anyone. Sometimes I look past you too. Any thoughts on the director's report? All set?
All set.
Okay. All right. Moving on, we're into Commissioner Communications. So Commissioner O'Neill, may as well start with you. I know you had one item. Any other items on your list?
I do. Couple things. So this was something I mentioned, no, not last time, maybe a couple months ago. Just finding a way to prioritize the projects that DPW is working on or DPW is planning on and communicating that out. Just in sort of managing public expectations. You know, I could get my knickers in a knot about the pothole in front of my, sorry, can I say that on TV? About the pothole in front of my driveway, right?
Yeah.
Without recognizing that there are a host of other things that have really higher priority. And because I think we're so focused like on our, you know, kind of neighborhood, on our, you know, kind of our world. And that may help, I guess, adjust expectations for the general public and at least communicate out what those things are. So that's one issue. Another one is tagging on to what Jason mentioned earlier, funding for walk-bike infrastructure. What resources does the city have, and where would kind of pulling some funding from for walk-bike infrastructure fit into the net zero energy plan or the roadmap that's been rolled out, which I feel like there is an aspect in there that is encouraging, you know, a 15% increase in walking and biking. So how do we leverage? Are there funds to leverage?
Right.
So where are they? How do we find them?
Sure. So currently, there are some dedicated funds. The street and sidewalk tax, street capital, is a dedicated tax that goes to the road and sidewalk network. Then 2% of that has historically been kind of dedicated for bicycle improvements, but we are investing significant other general funds on bike and pedestrian projects. So I'm happy it probably is a much longer conversation.
Right.
The city has a capital plan that has about a $40 million a year budget. When I got here, it was around $13 million. We have a coordinated citywide general fund capital budget, and we could go through how that is split up between municipal buildings, between streets and sidewalks, between parks facilities. Currently, a lot of those funds are not restricted, but there are far more needs than there are general fund dollars. And so each year we, through the budget process with the council, determine a capital budget as well as an operating budget for them to approve. So we could discuss, as you all have helped support and review new kind of bond proposals with the Clean Water Resiliency Plan, or your support of the 2016 Sustainable Infrastructure Plan, if there was a desire for a different funding approach. The ideas could be worked on here and then floated to the council for their consideration. Ultimately, a decision on a dedicated tax is a decision for the city council.
Last thing, someone communicated concerns about Mansfield Avenue. about the multi-use path that's going on the east side, and concerns that the sale of the convent will have an impact on traffic, and why do the multi-use path if we don't know what the traffic impact is going to be after the sale? And this just came to me, so I feel
Yeah.
like I needed to throw it out there.
Right. So, good question. So, as part of, as you all may know, there's been a very vocal group of neighbors wanting the east side of Mansfield Avenue fixed for many years. And I had asked to slow down the project until we completed Plan BTV walk bike and make a decision on whether we wanted to have a shared use path or a sidewalk. And through the Plan BTV process, it was determined that a shared use path would be the best approach. It would tie into the Colchester Avenue shared use path and the Old North End Greenway, providing kind of a low stress network. And so instead of having, traditional bike lanes on Mansfield, and all the parking would need to be removed off Mansfield in order to get bike lanes in both directions. So the shared use path was determined to be the appropriate design. In addition, there aren't many driveway curb cuts along Mansfield. So unlike many of our roads that have significant curb cuts, you don't want to do a shared use path where there's lots of conflict points. Mansfield seemed like one with a limited number of curb cuts. So does a new development change traffic entering that driveway? Most likely. And we'll need to factor that into the design of the project. We're planning to move ahead with the recommendation of a shared use path. I don't think that that it can't be accommodated, but we will have to design the curb cuts and the driveway access very carefully. And there'll be a public meeting for that project coming up in the next month, most likely.
We don't know, that property hasn't been sold, and who knows how long.
Right, I do not have knowledge of I have not been approached by a developer or a property owner with a clear plan for that property.
And it would be, is it mixed use, is it?
What's the zoning? I do not know what the
Okay,
zoning
okay.
is.
But mostly
Follow up with,
apartments kind of a thing, okay,
yeah.
all right,
My guess is it'll be some sort of housing, but.
yeah, okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Neill. Anything else on your list?
That was it.
Okay, good list. Commissioner Parr.
One of the public comments individuals, Jason, kind of spoke to most of the things that my neighborhood, the Old East End Neighborhood Coalition, had kind of brought up to me. So, but just very excited about the bike lanes going in on Colchester Avenue.
Yeah.
And looking at how that's going to mitigate some of the challenges.
We understand and acknowledge that the striping has taken a while. There's only one striping company in the state, and they want to come to Burlington when there's a chunk of work, because they can't go to Burlington and then go to another community far away in the same night. So they are waiting for us to complete some paving on other streets, and then we'll be coming in. We will get it done this year.
That's good to know.
Good insight. Thank you. Commissioner Hogan, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. Maybe a preview for one of our next couple of meetings is we're looking forward to a construction season recap. But a couple things to come to mind, and sort of touching on what Commissioner O'Neill-Bavaco said about expectation management for the public and communication and so forth. And I think about where are they now? Feature for our projects. I know we have our construction portal, but I'm often looking at there and saying I still don't know like what's the status of the striping on Colchester Ave. I guess if we're coming to these meetings, we kind of get a hint now that there's only one company in the state and where they're awaiting a bulk project. So hold your horses. We'll see you in 2 months or whatever it is, right? Or things like another month has gone by and there's still no sidewalk aprons at the corner of Union and Maple, for instance. I know there's been significant paving work on Maples. It's very exciting,
Right.
That's another 5 weeks now of 2 blocks away from school. It's just straight treacherous to impassable if you're certainly if you're mobility impaired there. So I'd love to have, and I just looked on the construction portal for that intersection now, and it's like there's a linear stripe up Maple for the paving, but there's no intel there other than bugging Maddie or whoever's name is there.
Right.
But that type of stuff that, it maybe is in staff's interest to the staff that's the point person for these projects certainly knows what's up. But maybe it's in their interest, and I think in all of our interest, to push that out a bit more, just a quick snippet to the update. And I think it was helpful this summer. People in the Birchcliff neighborhood were saying what's going on with, wasn't there going to be crosswalks there? And the staff contact had changed over the years since it was approved, but they went and, July 2019 update, contract is out to bid, expect construction such and such. So just taking that extra time to provide those updates if there's a project page, or maybe feeding it into this construction portal platform if that's useful, but just generally tracking of where things sit, I think would be useful, like something, I don't know, in something halfway between whatever staff uses to track their work internally and the public facing vision of what C-Clicks Fix could have been. I don't know, maybe there's something in the middle of
right
communication gaps there.
We can look at that. I think one of the Union and Maple piece is a great example. It's like, how deep do we go to briefing folks? Right. Things change on a daily basis, and construction schedules change based on weather, contractor issues, things we uncover. The Union and Maple issue is due to the grade. If you remember, if you go up go up Maple Street, that there was that real hard bump. And so what we've tried to do is take the time to engineer a solution there that takes that really severe bump out, because cars and trucks were bottoming out. And yeah, so we have we've taken the time to try to adjust the grades, and as a result, you can't build the sidewalk curb ramp until you know the grade of your road so that they can match for ADA access. Are we going to get into that level of detail? I don't know. It's a good question, and I will certainly bring this conversation back. I do think we need to be updating the construction portal more regularly. It's one of those things that during a busy construction season, it sometimes doesn't get that level of attention that I would like. And to your point, maybe it can save emails to project managers if that information is more regularly updated.
To that point, we're discussing next month, I believe, an agenda item that looks on the construction season, or?
December.
Sure, okay, December. Yep. Thank you.
Yes,
okay.
Thank
So
you.
we'll touch on all of that.
Yep.
The broken record department, something I touched on this time last month with regards to being more nimble with our traffic calming procedures. Now that we have some quick build options in our tool set, I was glad to see Councilor Tracy touching upon similar themes tonight. Just another plug for thinking in terms of responsiveness and what can we do sort of quickish to change the perceived experience in our streets until, or while awaiting VTrans approval to do the big scoping study, whatever needs to happen. Can we put some barrels out there and some paint and so forth, but sort of be leveraging that so it's not a 60% of the signatures on your street and get in the 4-year wait list for a speed bump. It's more of like hey, let's paint some lines and put some planters in and like this year kind of thing. Other real quick geek news, you may have seen Burlington's open data policy is up for public input starting, I believe, last week and going through next week. For what it's worth, if there are touch points with Public Works and our aspirations for communicating what we're up to, if there are sort of data elements that would be useful to be conveyed in terms of, I don't know, minutes or our progress towards net zero or whatever it is. And that's there's an invitation out there for public feedback on that now through, I believe, the 30th. Also, I'm attending a Transportation Research Board conference on visualization in transportation next month. For what it's worth, I'll keep an eye out for anything of interest for our work there in terms of information dashboards or whatnot. Anyways, that's all.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Gilman. Okay, we're on Commissioner Communications, by the way. In case you've forgotten, we're now down to you. Any communications, Commissioner Overby?
I was just going to ask I know last month we had the discussion about the, my concerns about what had happened with the private parking grant at the marina, the Burlington Harbor Marina, and we were going to have potentially an agenda item discussing how we would ensure that the Public Works Commission was actually, involved, according to the city charter, before any MOUs are signed for privatization of public lot space. Is that something that's going to be on the agenda? I wasn't sure when that was going to show up. I mean, maybe I should be asking you that question, because I know there's going to be other pressures on us to be, giving away public parking lots to private development, probably like the Gateway Block. And I wanted to make sure that what I think happened with the Burlington Harbor Marina MOUs, without coming to us about that, doesn't happen again. And so we can have a discussion about how we're going to make that, how we can discuss to make that happen so that things aren't happening, and then we, after the fact, just get to come and rubber stamp it, which is sort of what happened. Is that something that's, I don't know how far ahead you plan for agenda items, but can that be put on the agenda at some point when it fits into your schedule? And I don't know who you would want to bring to the discussion.
So if I'm going to recap here, it'd be, do we have development agreements that perhaps involve parks that, we were talking about exploring taking over parking lots, and I think you were fairly candid in the last meeting about, kind of tossing around the idea of maybe DPW taking over hardscapes and giving parks softscapes. So I'll kind of defer to you since we kind of collaborate on the agenda. Is that something worth talking about at this point, or what are your thoughts?
Sure, I see those two items as maybe related but distinct. I think what I'm understanding for Commissioner Overby is a desire to better understand policies and protocols for public-private development projects and when the city allocates parking to be used by private entities. And I think what we were talking about as it related to parks and DPW was around, are there parks lots that DPW may choose to want to manage? So already public lots that parks manages that maybe DPW conceptually would provide management services for those lots. And to your sharing of greenscapes, hardscapes, that is a third component about stormwater infrastructure. And so if there's pervious asphalt or pavers, would DPW manage those, and parks then manage the greenscape as part of rain gardens or bioretention areas? So happy to delve into either of those three.
Are they really separate, or do they fall under one umbrella? Because I don't want to confuse things.
Right. I think why they fell under one umbrella last meeting is that the northern waterfront lot, which is a public-private lot, is pervious and needs to be maintained to remain pervious. And so I think that's how all three got merged. It was originally going to be a parks lot.
Yes.
That's why it didn't come to the commission. I had articulated the reasons why I wanted DPW to manage it, which is why it in the end needed to come to the commission. And then that brought up the whole issue of who's maintaining the pervious pavers. And so that's how all three issues got combined on that one parking lot.
Okay. So are you looking for more precise, like the
I
bigger
think
umbrella or smaller?
my concern is relating to the fact that there are appear to be in the city charter requirements that the Public Works Commission is responsible for reviewing any privatization of public municipal parking lots. And I'm not, I wasn't persuaded by it was going to be the parks, and then it was because there was no clear authority of the parks to be able to, in effect, really give away 40 years of exclusive parking at most of that parking lot. So I wanted to have a discussion of somebody who could really make it obvious that we know, that we are clear that the Public Works Commission is responsible for any kinds of privatization of these public resources, parking resources. That's what I'm getting at. And that if in fact, and I know we had a city councilor there, if in fact we need to have somebody, we discussed the fact that maybe the city charter is not what we want anymore, but that's what it is. So I wanted a discussion of what I thought was the city charter requirements, that we should have had the opportunity to review that, because in fact that is a public resource that nobody had authority in the Parks Department that I could see to actually give that away. So I wanted clarification of that, because I have one perception of it, but I thought it's going to happen again potentially. So what is really?
For clarity here, I just want to be sure. Are you looking to revisit that issue?
No, I'm looking at future. Because it happened, and we had a story of why it supposedly happened, but my concern is that we will be put in a position again, and I want to find out what, in fact, is the process when we were presented with information, for example, the Gateway block coming up. It's being worked on, and the development community is discussing that, and that happens to relate to the municipal parking lot at the corner of Main and South Winooski. If there are discussions happening and an MOU will be signed based on city council deciding that this is the plan, and then after the fact it comes to Public Works and you sign off on this deal because the city council's already signed off. I'm concerned that process, if that's that doesn't seem like what the city charter says, and so we either decide to propose to change the city charter, say city council should make those decisions, not Public Works, about that kind of thing. So I'm just trying to get clarification. That's what I'm trying to, so that we, going forward, will actually have that brought to the Public Works Commission before an MOU is signed, and then we're told later that you have to go along with the MOU. Does that make sense? Because I think there's other developments. There's pressures. There's Elmwood lot on Elmwood. There's quite a few lots that we've always had complaints about selling off the public resources too. So I'm concerned that we make sure that we are very clear how we are involved, and ensuring that we do stay involved if we are supposed to, according to the city charter, be the one that makes a decision about those privatization of public resources, municipal parking lots. I don't know how to word it any other way, and it may be that it could be coordinated with this discussion about moving some of the maintenance, the management of parks lots to the Public Works Commission. I mean the Public Works Department.
I think they're separate items. I'm happy to invite
Yeah.
city attorney back to discuss the city charter authorities and how future efforts need to comply with the charter, and whether or not the commission thinks that any changes to charter need to be made, or feels that based on the existing charter language, feels that your interests are protected.
That might be so that we do get involved when we're supposed to, and if we want to change that, that's fine too. But
Yeah, just my perspective is that we still do hold statutory authority over these parking lots, and when it comes down to it, we will either vote in favor of such a transaction or not, as we were voting on last month regarding the north parking lot. And so I think a majority of the commission in that case felt that it was a circumstance that was a series of coincidences that, clearly, I know you have a differing opinion on that and all, but if if the city were to continually come to the commission with that type of situation, I would imagine that this commission would perk up its ears to such a situation and think that suddenly a loophole is being used to take advantage of a privatization of public lots. So I do take faith at a minimum that we hold statutory authority over it and we play each scenario as it comes.
I just didn't know how we would make sure that it was brought to the commission if that was what was supposed to happen. And I'm not sure how you get notified of these things and ahead of time so that you could be looking out for the interests of the commission's role.
Right,
I'm not sure
absolutely.
who's supposed to look out for the commission's role because we wouldn't know unless
Right.
it was on our agenda and it seems like it was a
Yeah.
couple years late on our agenda. But
Happy to talk
Yeah,
through it.
maybe we can work
I
on
think
the-
we all did
Yeah.
a great job on the Boves lot where we did the process properly. We came to you all first, got the recommendation, went to city council. If we did Main and Winooski, that is considered a municipal lot the same way Elmwood is. So we'd have to come to you all for a recommendation to sell or transfer rights. So we'd absolutely have to come to you before city council. If something's not a municipal lot seen as managed by DPW, then I believe the charter is less directive and prescriptive, that we need to come to you to sell an asset. If it's a municipal garage or lot overseen by DPW, then it is protected, as I understand from the charter, that your recommendation to sell is required before the council can act.
And so maybe there is no problem. Maybe you've already changed the.
What was different about the Harbor Marina is that wasn't considered a municipal lot that was run by DPW as a public lot available, as our downtown lots are.
Because it was a newly constructed lot.
Yeah.
And it was Parks jurisdiction.
And originally, it was envisioned as a Parks lot that was going to be created on the waterfront. So it didn't come to the DPW commission first.
Well, then maybe there isn't an issue.
So, but I'd be happy to have the attorneys kind of give you their professional advice. I'm not a lawyer. This is charter language and interpretation, and if you want, further clarification of the charter, I'm happy to invite them to a subsequent meeting.
Yeah, we can talk about it separately, because it sounds like maybe it's been resolved, that you know that it's not going to happen because we're not dealing with parks lots anymore. We're just dealing with municipal lots.
Yeah.
I guess the one circumstance would be if Parks built a new lot again in some other agreement, and
Well-
that then.
Well, this is where the charter doesn't give the parks authority to do anything with private leases. So this is my concern. That's a loophole. Get the Parks Department to
Agreed,
take
and
it.
that's-
And maybe that's what we.
Maybe that's a Parks Commission
That's an
issue and
issue.
not a DPW Commission issue, because our authority, I believe your authority as the Commission for Public Works is related to public works related assets.
As I recall that, it was a private venture and a parks desire to build a parking lot separately that they decided to join together, and that's why it got so convoluted in my mind. If it was a private venture, they would have been building a private lot by themselves, and then Parks wanted to build a lot for them, and they were looking probably at an economy of trying to do it together, and that's why it got messy. And then they decided, I don't know, either you decided or they decided, maybe DPW should be playing with this instead of.
I decided.
Yeah,
I
so,
didn't want to rehash the whole thing.
but I
was
think
just-
in the
it's an
future, it's already set in stone that we own parking decisions. So I think I like your idea of looking forward at what might possibly come to us from Parks. Because if this deal does go through where they deal greenbelt, we deal pavement, hardscape, then
Yeah.
we can just look across the board and see what exists.
That's a discussion.
And it might already exist, and it might be the same situation where they've already got something leased out to somebody else, or it's a partnership, but at least we'll know.
Okay. So let's connect offline with the attorney, talk through if it requires further discussion here. Happy to work with the chair and add an agenda item that the commissioners want to a future agenda.
That's fine.
Okay.
Anything else on your list, Commissioner Overby?
I was just gonna say, I walked through the St. Paul Street, Maple corner, and that corridor, and it looks great. It looks like the cars were moving, and people were enjoying the sidewalk, and I think, what is your thought? You feel like it's improved based on what you did? It looked great
Street's
to me.
remarkable, and it is a great success story, and I'm really proud of what staff did to pull off a very challenging project of a 200-year-old street.
That's all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just real quick items for me. I heard from someone talked about the strip of street. I guess that's Manhattan. It may be Riverside in front of the Boys and Girls Club in the Old North End. Is that Manhattan or is that Riverside right there? Might be Riverside.
Girls Club?
Right? I think once it takes that
I
corner.
believe it
You know where I'm
is.
talking
Yes.
about. So between the stop signs, it sounds like that little strip. Cars sounds like they're going. They're exceedingly fast, and I think this person brought it up for pitching ideas on what could be done to maybe contain that traffic, whether a bump out at the crosswalk at the Boys and Girls Club or something to narrow that street to slow down cars, something to that effect. So figured I'd pass that along. And then lastly, for all of us here, we do have a new commissioner on the commission who is sitting over there, also dressed like a phantom, as I sometimes show up to the parking lots. But he will actually be unable to attend with us until December, I believe, will be the first month he can attend. So he will join us at that point, and hopefully going forward, we'll have a seventh member to break our stalemate that we always have on these votes. So that's it. Commissioner communications are done. Last action is adjournment and next meeting date.
Motion to adjourn.
There it is.
Second.
And it's seconded. Motion to adjourn by Commissioner Barr, seconded by Commissioner O'Neill. Feel like an auctioneer.
Put that in the template, Holly.
That's going to be a given.
Any discussion? No discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.